All right. The chair will bring to order the Monday, May 15th, 2017 Single Family Design Board. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address any item not on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, the chair will close public comment and bring it back for approval of our minutes for our May 1st, 2017 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
Make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right. We had a continued item, item G, that was continued from the morning session of May 1st for 33 Los Alturas Circle. Is there any comments, questions? And then we had item number 1, 2439 Santa Barbara Street. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have
Yes,
a comment. In my decision to not support the project, I mentioned the quote-unquote fabric of the neighborhood, and I wanted to elaborate that in driving by that again after the meeting, where a number of us were on the fence, I wanted to say that it's a traditional neighborhood, and that I really feel strongly that the standing seam that was approved is not appropriate, and I don't know if there's any possible action, but if you drive within a large perimeter of that project, there are no standing seam roofs.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
Well, given that, does the board have any options in a situation like this?
We can allow staff to address it, but I don't believe the 10-day appeal period is now passed, and you did give it approval.
Okay.
So, as I understand it, anyone in the community can file an appeal, including members of this board, to a decision made by this board. But I believe that time period is passed. So, Katie, I'm looking to you to.
Yeah, because that was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the appeal section in here and seeing what it says. Well,
I just wanted to elaborate on my decision
that's
for not
let
supporting.
me check in with Jaime real quick, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I'm the one that made the motion. I just want to say something on the motion that I made. The reason I did is because the Upper East Side is constantly changing. And if we take the stance that, there's no standing seam roof, we might as well take the stance of just eliminating architecture to evolve through the years. I, myself, and a few of the other people on this board own property in the Upper East Side. Not near this, but, and we have indeed changed the style of architecture in Upper East Side, and nobody has objected to what it has changed over the last 50 years. And if we come to a conclusion that we can't change it at all, we might as well just eliminate the flat roofs and the asphalt shingles roofs and everything else that wasn't there 80 years ago when those original houses were built.
Well, I have a follow-up comment on that. I understand what your point of view is, Joe, but a lot of times when people buy into a certain neighborhood, there's a certain style of architecture that's already established, and they put in a great deal of investment and assume that the integrity of the architecture of that particular neighborhood is such that, and that's kind of what I think we got to be careful of. We can't just go by, well, of course architecture evolves, it changes, blah, 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 but there's also a fabric and an already established architectural style of a neighborhood that I think we also need to respect. And so it's kind of a gray area, but that's kind of how I feel about it, because there are many new homes that have been approved in these neighborhoods that are very unlike what's already there, causes a great deal of upset and anger with fellow neighbors who have invested a lot in their property, assuming that their neighborhood will stay a certain character. So I think we need to be very careful when we assume that just because architecture evolves, that it has to always be the cutting edge, newest version that's on the storefront. And just, it's like I said, it's not a black and white, it's a gray area, but I think that's important to keep that in mind as well.
And there are pockets of change. I'm not saying blanket, general, all Upper East cannot change, but in the areas that are obviously a certain style, to keep those intact would be my priority.
Okay.
I checked with Jaime, and he said that you could have requested a reconsideration of the action that was taken, but since the appeal period has passed and that window has also passed at this time, there's
But
really
we didn't have a meeting between then and now.
But I think the point is, you could have notified staff within that 10-day appeal period that you had a concern. So just
Oh,
kind
so
of
for
so you
next
know.
time, if there's
if
something
we're
comes up again like that?
Then you need to,
If you would like to request for reconsideration or appeal, it would have to be done in that time frame.
This is
that
the second-
10-day period.
This is the second time we've had this discussion, and probably in the third time. We all know that within 10 days, come before the staff and make an objection or make an appeal personally.
didn't know, so now we do.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but let's go on. Item number 2, 3360 Braemar Drive. Item number 3, 1625 Overlook Lane. Item number 4, 507 San Onofre Road. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Before we leave, you'll notice that on item 1, I recused myself from that discussion, mainly because I'm within 1,000 feet of that property. Now, I know under our guidance from the city attorney's office, the state dictates 300 feet. But I've always erred to the caution so that there wasn't any not misunderstanding among the public or the board members that I might have a particular interest in a property. So I've kind of just made my own rule that within 1,000 feet, I'm not going to make a comment on that particular project. However, I will make comment on the issues you've just brought up. One of our very difficult tasks is to determine the characters of neighborhoods, and also the difficult task is to define the neighborhood. And it would be fairly easy to define neighborhoods if we were a square city, block city. In other words, the whole city was flat and all the blocks were 500 feet by 500 feet. We could carve out neighborhoods, but we're not. We have the Riviera, we have the mountainsides over on the Mesa, we have the different configurations all over the city. So without any clear guidance, even within our guidelines, it's up to this board to determine the neighborhood. So is that the street? Is it houses to the right or left of a particular property, a few hundred feet, or 1,000 feet, or whatever? So as you go through these deliberations, it might be helpful for you to share what your perception is of the neighborhood as we have that discussion, because I think we all probably may have different perceptions of what the neighborhood means. And that's pretty important, particularly when we have a contentious issue before us where we have several neighbors that have viewpoints that they're trying to express. So I think if you're clear about what your perception is in the neighborhood, that's fairly important. And then the second thing is not only talk about the fabric of the neighborhood or the streetscape, but share with us your definition of what that is, because I think all of us may have a different idea of what the fabric might mean. In some cases, we might be dealing with a Spanish tile roof in a neighborhood that has none. We might be dealing with I'm just using roofs as an example, a wooden roof in a neighborhood where it's all Spanish tile. That may be the issue. We may be in a neighborhood where there's a mix of interpretations of 1- and 2-story buildings. I can think of a couple of neighborhoods, particularly up on Bellar Knolls, where there's a whole combination of second floors, and then in those days they built what they call tri-level homes that kind of appear to be 1-story, but they're really 2-story by definition, et cetera. So I think if you can share as you go through those discussions your interpretations, and then most importantly, when a motion is made, particularly if we feel like the possibility that our decision may be appealed to City Council, that we're pretty clear about what our thinking process is, because that's going to travel, that motion travels to the City Council. And they kind of look to that document. Generally, I've tried to attend the meetings where appeals have occurred and try to speak on your behalf, but I may not always speak what you're thinking. So I think that's pretty important, very helpful. The interesting thing is, at least so far in the 6+ years I've been on this board, we've only ever had one appeal that was overturned from our decision. All the other ones have adhered to our decision-making process. So I think we're kind of doing a good job, but I think it also helps as we move forward to make sure we really share what our thoughts are, particularly if you're the person making the motion. So, having said that, and we've discussed all these items, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I will abstain because I was out on that one item. Okay, let's go to the consent calendar for May 8th. Katie.
The minutes for the May 8th consent agenda are as follows. Item A, 1865 Stanwood Drive, received approval of review after final is submitted. Item B, 1106 Crestline Drive, received project design approval and final approval as submitted with comments. Item C, 3102 Seacliff, received project design approval and final approval as submitted and was continued 1 week to consent with comments. Item D, 1110 Chino Street, received project design approval and final approval as submitted, with the finding that the NPO criteria have been met as stated in subsection 22.69.050 of the City of Santa Barbara's Municipal Code. Item E, 2126 Ridge Lane, was continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer to return to consent, with positive comments that the board found the modification requests aesthetically appropriate and in keeping with the character of architecture and neighborhood. Item F, 1214 High Ridge Lane, continued indefinitely to the staff hearing officer to return to consent, with positive comments that the board found the modification request aesthetically appropriate for the window.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, can I get a second first? Do I have a second? Second. Okay, yes, comment.
On the minutes for item number B, 1106, I know the architect on item number 2 said the applicant to add a small roof protection with a chunky brace over the garage. I'd like to replace chunky with a minimum 4x4 brackets, because that's what he actually meant.
Okay, thank you. Is that change acceptable to the seconder? Yes. Okay. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Let's go to consent calendar for this morning, May 15th.
I'll take some.
Oops.
The minutes for the May 15th consent agenda are as follows. Item A, 1405 Mission Ridge Road, received approval of review after final as submitted. Item B, 1520 Franceschi Road, received final approval as submitted. Item C, 3102 Seacliff, was continued 1 week to consent with the comment for the applicant to study the total landscape area and determine if the turf is appropriate for the slope and irrigation requirements. Item D, 33 Los Alturas Circle, was continued indefinitely to consent with the comment that the board found the revised entry element acceptable. Item E, 1291 West Mountain Drive, received project design approval and final approval as submitted with the NPO findings. And this motion also needs to be revised to reflect a condition that the garage, that we verify that the garage does not encroach into the interior setback, required interior setback.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there further discussion or comment? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Okay, let's go to announcements. Katie.
Yes, I'd just like to clarify, I think it was at our last meeting, you had brought up a question about whether the budget was going to have any effect on any of the design review boards.
Yes.
And I spoke with staff and it does not.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements? Any subcommittee reports?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm just going to bring this up. It's kind of out of the blue, but since the whole zoning revision is underway right now, I think somebody really should look at that 10-day appeal period, and I think it's too short. I just don't think that 10 days gives the community enough time to gather and talk and figure out what they want. I'd just like to put that out there.
Bernie, I think I was at one of the NZO hearings, and someone else in the community brought that issue up at one of the hearings.
I think it's been talked about.
The city attorney at each point has said that's not a subject that can be considered under the NZO. It's actually some other legislative process that would have to be addressed by the city council. At least that's my memory of what I recall.
So I guess, to follow up on that, the question for you is if staff can find out that
Yeah.
Who, what, where.
Yeah. But that was the answer I remember hearing,
Yeah.
that it wasn't the subject of the NZO, but it was another process that we'd have to go through to deal with it.
Appeals in general.
Okay, but yeah, Katie, if you could get us an answer, that would be helpful. Okay. Anything else? Okay, if not, then let's go to our first item. This is 1135 Harbor Hills Drive. This is here for project design approval, and final approval are requested. It must comply with the staff hearing officer resolution of number 015-17 and was last reviewed on November 14th, 2016. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
My name is Tom Oxner, project architect.
Ryan Brotherson, landscape architect.
Might turn that on, and you can push the microphone towards you so you can manipulate it.
Brian Brotherson, landscape architect.
Okay, thank you, welcome. Brian, do we have comments from our last November?
Yes, I do.
Action?
Number one, the proposed front and interior modifications on the northeast fireplace and the northwest garage are aesthetically appropriate and do not pose consistency issues with the single-family design guidelines and findings. Number two, reduce the master bedroom bathroom wing. Number three, rework the new roof over the existing part of the house. Number four, remove the palm tree and provide current landscape plans with details for only the areas affected by the remodel and additions. Number five, practice good neighbor guidelines by meeting with neighborhood for neighborhood compatibility after design modifications to the plans have been made. Number six, the board does not support the standing seam roof. Action carried by Motishas, seconded by Bernstein. Motion was carried.
Can you read number 4 again?
Remove the palm tree and provide current landscape plans with details for only the areas affected by the remodel and the addition.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so if you could share with us how you address those comments, please.
Yes, so it's been a while. This project went through the mod process, and so during that period of time, we met with a concerned neighbor to the west. That neighbor we went back and forth with several times, and I want to address this item number 2 sort of in the context of that particular dialogue, because that was, I think, the reason for the comment in the first place. So I think, let's just go, basically, I'm going to go to the proposed site plan. I think that's probably a good one. Here we go. So this is the master bathroom wing, and at that meeting, this was the plan as it came out here. So my interpretation of that was to bring this back in from the south, and so we brought it in 2 feet from the south, and then sometime after that, through the course of dialogue with the neighbor, we re-story poled this for the purposes of their viewing. It was not conditioned by the board for story polling, but you had asked that we do that to accommodate that move. And then at that time, we also clipped the corner as we were asked to do by the neighbor as well. And so now this is the current configuration that you're looking at right now relative to that comment. Let's see, number 3, rework the new roof over the existing part of the house. Yes, I think that was Brian's comment, and that has been done. move over to the roof plan here. And I have the old plans here too, but as I think you can see, this area has been cleaned up significantly. There were two apexes here, and then we just continued the ridge across to simplify the roof. Item 4, there was a palm tree proposed. It was kind of loosely proposed for an area hole in the roof there to bring some backlighting, and since then we put in just an opening and a planter down below with no intention of trying to get something up. And Brian can expand on that. We have a final landscape plan here now, whereas before we didn't. Item 5, practice good neighbor guidelines. By meeting with neighbors, we went back and forth several times, and I kind of feel we're at a little bit of an impasse right now. The latest discussion was really involved trying to lower the roof. There's a view, a secondary view that the neighbor to the west has laterally over the property towards the east. I think I'm going to go back to this first, in way to the front. Yeah, the photos. So I think, yeah, this is kind of a good angle. So I think we looked at this before. So there's some views here. This is the neighbor to the west. There are views out in this direction, which are of value to her. And you know, this house sits up relatively high, as opposed to our property right here. So what we've done then is we looked at the existing house is 12 feet 2 inches high right now, and our proposed increased roof height over the east part of the house would raise that roof height up 1 foot 2 inches. So it would be 13 feet 4 inches, which is a very low height. And you know, the purpose of that is to try to get a little bit of volume. This is kind of the concept that the owner really wants. It doesn't take a lot of volume to do it, but a hipped volume with a 10-foot lanai. And so, you know, that translates into raising a portion of the roof line 1 foot 2 inches. But unfortunately, that little increase blocks out a little bit of that view that is over the side. So that's kind of where the discussion's bogged down. And then there is a drawing. I think it's this next page here. Here we go. So then this kind of gives you a clear idea as to what is going on here. This is the house to the west. So I've cut a few sections that run through there. So the height of that house, and so the view is really kind of out over the top of the house. But then there has now become sort of, as we've developed a landscape plan and we've looked at the privacy issue, we need to come up with a good neighbor solution as to how to handle privacy but not interfere unnecessarily with that view. So what we've looked at doing is to go with the string line from the neighbor's house out to our house, and then look at only extending a fence line out to that point. And that fence line wouldn't exceed 8 feet. And the purpose of that, as you can see, is to create some privacy from the subject property, from the windows that are looking out to the east. As you can see, the existing wall is only 6'6" along the majority of that length, and there is no intent of increasing that any higher as long as we can get some kind of vegetative screening along there. Of course, 8-foot fences, you know, don't trigger design review, but I wanted to include it here just so that we could show you the process, as this is a part of the good neighbor policy to go through. So I think the landscape plan also will address the landscaping through here and bring up the privacy issue. Let's see, as far as okay, so the roof has been changed from a standing seam to a tiled roof. It's got a horizontal sort of a feel to it, where it would be a heavy tiled roof with a these horizontal lines that I think will give that a bit of that tropical feel to the low pitch, and without the use of the standing seam, which has been abandoned. So in terms of the drawings, yes, I can kind of go through and show you. We're asking for final, so I'll just kind of take you through the drawings. As you recall, the roof is getting cut here, and there's a sort of a tall arcade pergola that runs from the street back to the entrance door. This is the existing house, which is 12.2 in height. So the proposed plan really, doesn't change. This is the entry, this is the addition we were speaking of. This is the area where the roof gets raised 1 foot to the master bathroom addition. This wall got pushed back and the corner clipped. And again, the purpose of that increase is to get a little volume here and to get a 10-foot high lanai space, which is tall enough to allow some light to bounce back deep into the space here. And then we looked at the roof plan. These are the proposed plans. So you can see this is the addition. So the addition isn't going up any higher, or it's lower than the existing height of the house. And then this is that ridge line that is slightly going up to capture the volume for the living room area that we were just looking at. And then from the entrance, from the street, a little entry element here. And then this is a portion of that covered space to the back. So here we're grabbing as much volume as we can in the building sections to account for that low height. I think the height allowance in that area is 25 feet. Clad windows. So in terms of the color scheme, we've got kind of a deep window color and trim, the roofing, the stucco body, the wood trim. And let's see, so there's a sloped plastered eave which we're continuing to carry around. That's a remnant of the existing house. And otherwise fairly simple details. It's a pretty simple exterior detail of the entry pergola as it meets the roof. And then I've got my SWMP here too, in case anyone's interested. It's a tier 3 hillside, so I can go over that if anyone is interested in that. And then Brian, you're up. Okay.
So bring that microphone around so they can hear you. There you go. You have to talk into it. Sorry. So you may want to move over.
Angle's a little funky.
You may want to move over a little bit so you can talk into it.
Tom, let me move. Yeah, that's it.
Is that me?
There you go.
Okay, let's see what we got here. So let's look at the neighbor situation first, since that seems to be of some issue. So we have some evergreen material at this edge, and as mentioned before, it would be an extension to the existing property line fence and wall. And we have a fruitless olive on this corner. The intention is to maintain the vegetation to satisfy that neighbor view. And then this is an existing little fruit orchard that they have in place. The front of the property, we're adding a tree here. We're redesigning this little internal court area. And then at the front of the property, this is not counted as part of the stormwater treatment, but it is a stormwater treatment of sort. But there would be a small landscape feature, which is sort of a Asian style, if you will. And the back, expanding the patio slightly, proud of the covered lanai, and then the plantings are intended to be adapted and drought tolerant, so that they would be watered to establishment only. And then at that point, we would probably water the trees a little bit, and that would be about it.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
think that's it.
Okay. Before we go to review questions by the board, we do have public comment. We've received, I believe, 2 letters. I'll go to the letters after we hear from public comments. So we have 3 speakers. So I have a Hilton Herrick, here, Nick? Hornick, excuse me. If you could come forward, please.
Hi.
Hi, if you could speak into that microphone, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you
have
for...
2 minutes to address the board.
Certainly, thank you for hearing me. I work at Scafidi Law that helps represent Nancy in this matter. She is the concerned neighbor to the west, as Tom and this gentleman mentioned.
You need to speak into the microphone.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So a couple points that I wanted to bring to the board's attention, mainly were we are, I think the neighbor is mostly concerned and laments the fact that we're actually at the board meeting now because we were in discussions with Tom and the owners of this residence, and we feel like we're making good progress. Unfortunately, we had the design review board meeting and we had to come to this meeting now before discussions really were closed. And part of those discussions revolved around the plate height of the roof, as Tom mentioned, and also our main concern being privacy issue for Ms. Engstrom's residence here. If we have some photos, I'll show you. So our main concern, like I was mentioning, is the addition of the master bathroom. The addition of the master bathroom is set to...
Place it here for the camera.
You guys might want to trade places or something,
Yeah. You need to
just
point
so he has
something
an
out.
easier access to the great eye.
So as we can see here, thank you, Tom. This is our client's property line here, and we have the master bath. These are the old plans we were discussing last time. Master bath encroaching close to our neighbors or our client's property line. And original discussions revolved around perhaps pushing this back a foot. Earlier in the single-family design review board meetings, we discussed maybe pushing this back a foot or two, which Tom Oxner, to his credit, they did push that back a little bit. Part of our negotiations were revolving around this concern of these windows here, here, and here. As you can tell from the pictures seen here, our client's views will look directly into that master bath. So we were trying to come to some sort of agreement on how we might go about renegotiating this master bath. And with our time allotment, we're being very brief. Let's show some pictures for the board. We have,
If you could wrap up, please.
certainly. We have some views taken from our client's property showing the current, this is going to be the fence that's proposed for privacy issue. You can see them all here. I have them all for the board. You can see how this will affect her view from sitting from her
Thank you.
inside of her house.
Thank you.
And we also employed Rob Mell, a local architect, to help us redesign this in conjunction with what we were talking about with the master bath for privacy concern. There's a
Thank you.
copy
Thank
for
you.
everybody.
Your time is up, so we'll let the board look at those things. Thank you. Okay, let's go to our next speaker, Jim Scafidi. Scafidi, sorry.
Jim Scafidi, I represent Nancy Engstrom, the neighbor to the west. There's a couple of things following up on Hudson's suggestion. So, Architect Mail's proposal here does a couple of things, right? So, I'm not surprised to learn that this new addition in this corner was added along with the screen that is articulated in that picture.
Is it this corner?
I'm
or
sorry,
is
this
that-
corner.
that's
I'm sorry, this
Warburg
corner. I
Hills?
apologize. This corner.
Okay.
It was different up there, along with this screen. The architect, Tom Oshner, told me that if we didn't approve the project as proposed, he was going to put up a screen in a tree he wouldn't like, and sure enough, he did that. What we are proposing is a way to address the privacy needs of the applicant, and that is merely to change the design of the windows here and slightly relocate the tub. Essentially, this remains exactly the same. They were accommodating it, cutting off this corner, and the purpose of that was to create privacy, knowing that they wanted a view of this area over here, which we've accommodated by our proposed plan. And Mr. Mail's prepared to discuss those if the board has any questions about those. I will suggest, as regard to the good neighbor policy not been followed here, we did not have a chance to meet with the architect after the revised plans were submitted, which is rather frustrating to us. We were also threatened that if we didn't accept the plan, they would go forward with something like that, which they did. We have offered to agree with the new height on the roof, provided they would accept something like that. They refused to do that. And I would finally point out that it's my understanding that it's the policy of this board not to consider a project until, if there are CCNRs, until the CCNR reviewing board has reviewed them. They have been advised that there are CCNRs, and they have chosen to not pursue that, despite numerous complaints about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, last speaker is Nancy Engstrom. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Sweeney and board members. Unfortunately, since we last met, the original certified letter that I sent requesting to meet with Mercedes Millington and John Mithun, dated November 11, 2016, regarding their proposed project was returned to me unclaimed on January 3rd, 2017. It has been very challenging for me trying to work with my new neighbors when they have not been directly involved in any of the planning process for the past 6 months. It wasn't until last week that Mercedes reached out to my attorney for the first time and expressed a desire to talk directly with me. It is imperative that my new neighbors and I be given the opportunity to meet and talk with one another, and I truly hope that Mercedes will respond to my recent email dated May 12, 2017, and agree to meet at my home so that she and John can visualize the impact that Mr. Oshner's current proposed plans will have on my property values, my views, and my health and well-being. I definitely want to get to know them and hear their concerns as well. For the past 6 months, this proposed project has taken a significant financial, physical, and emotional toll on me, and the thought of losing my historical views that our family has cherished since 1982 is unimaginable. I'm getting the feeling that Mr. Oshner is letting his personal feelings interfere with his decision-making process in the final plans. It makes me wonder whether he is using these as a form of retaliation because I wouldn't agree to his 2 concessions. He took what was intended to be a concession when we clipped that corner, and which was intended to help preserve my scenic view, and instead used it to his advantage to make more room to plant a fruitless olive tree instead. This will clearly eliminate the entire objective we set out to achieve in the first place. At the November 16, 2016 board meeting, I was under the impression that when it was recommended that the master bath be brought in a few feet, it would be on the side facing my property, not the rear lot line. He interpreted it differently. I believe that the recommendations made by Robert Mill, the architect, are very reasonable and would provide both parties with privacy without requiring a fence or obstructive trees or views.
If you could wrap up, please. 2 minutes are up.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I appreciate your
We have your letter also.
We have it.
Yes.
Thank you. It fell on the floor. Oh, here it is. There you go. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the board on this item? Seeing no one else come forward, I'm going to close public comment, and I think Ms. Engstrom just read most of her letter that we received earlier today, and including a letter that we received by email that was addressed to the applicant and copied us. So, Katie, was there any other communication?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, the chair is going to close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. So who has questions?
May I respond?
Well, let me get the questions out of the way, and then you can respond as we go through comments.
I had a question
Yes.
about, I'm just trying to understand one of the perspective drawings. I think it's this one, actually. Where is this and then where is that from the standing point of view?
So this is section A right here. So this cuts right, this is the addition, this is the top of bank that slopes down. So this is the neighbor's house right here. So that's probably about right here, cutting through the site. And then this one, B, is up here further. It's right up against where this starts sloping off, and that's the ocean out that way. So that's the view. So this is a section.
So this is through the patio.
That's through the patio, exactly. So that kind of gives you a relative idea as to what we're dealing with, yeah.
So someone standing here, is that what that relates to?
Exactly, well, yeah,
So
right.
someone standing
Right
up here and
And
looking,
someone would be on the terrace out here. If someone was standing here, that's just a line of sight from here, kind of down into here. So it gives you an idea of this location and then this location deeper into the site.
and this is the roof?
That's the roof, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just to be clear, the windows of privacy issues are in this wall here, correct?
Right, they're on the grade level, right.
So your section is indicating that the line of sight is blocked by this fence.
Yes, back here at A, exactly. So, and that's why we're not proposing to raise this at all. There's no reason to do that. This wall is 6'6", and that's fine. There's no reason to go to 8 foot along the property line. There's privacy there already.
Okay. Are you,
Other questions?
yeah, are you're going to extend this wall out at all? Not height, but.
Right, not in height.
Not in
So,
height,
right, it
but you
stays
are
this-
extending the wall out.
Just going to extend it out to the string line point to get a little privacy off of, and so that, this could be an 8-foot fence. We're not doing that. We're just dealing with it just on a privacy level.
What's the distance between the lot line and the new construction?
Okay, so, yeah, that'll work. I've got a site plan here
It's
too.
1/8 inch, roughly 14 feet. And the required setback from the property line on this property is what, 10 feet?
It's 6, I believe.
6 feet. Okay.
Is it
So
10? No, it's 10.
It's
10 feet, yeah.
So it's 16 feet back, if I measured this correctly. And if you measure here at 1/4 inch, there's 14 feet here between this corner and the property line. And the middle of this wall is roughly 17 feet here. And over here, it's roughly 20 feet, 6 inches. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? I do have one question on the landscape plan, just to be clear.
Let's see how it's.
This fruitless olive, is that a new tree or existing tree?
That's a new tree, and the intent of the fruitless olive, that is also a southwest exposure, so that end of the building is going to get baked pretty well. It's a very slow-growing tree, very neat tree, and that's why the tree is there and has been on the plan from the beginning. Any plans that they might have seen would have had that.
And typically, how high does that tree grow?
Those trees can be controlled to be 15 feet tall, they can be 30 feet tall. There's a wide variety of scales of that particular tree.
Okay, I'm going to pose a question to my colleagues. You don't have to answer now, you can answer during comment. Is the porosity of that kind of tree, that species, in terms of being able to see through it? If you could share that with us. Let's see. I think that was my main question. Other questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, other questions?
I have another question. Is the majority of the, two parts to this question. One, Ms. Engstrom is objecting to the fact that you're blocking her view structurally and with a fence and landscape, both. Which is the one that stands out the most? I mean, if you put landscaping on that side of her property, you're not going to see the building that the master bathroom you're putting in. Is that true? Am I stating something that's true, Tom?
Possibly, if it grows out, if it's, really these homes along here, it's all about the good neighbor. If you look at the views, each neighbor gets along with the next one, and the ability of how the yin and the yang is really the magic to how the view is maintained along there. So it's, that's a real dynamic question, because the purpose of this fence is for privacy. It doesn't go beyond what would otherwise.
Okay, the second part of this question is Ms. Engstrom, she's she has the question, not complaining, but she has the question that she doesn't have the privacy that you're putting windows there for her to look into. I mean, am I
Okay,
stating in it right?
No. When two houses are at grade and
Well, hers is much higher than yours, and the bathrooms are, and those two bathroom windows are quite a ways away.
right,
Could you go back to that section? Where is
it
that?
becomes kind of a question as to if a one-story addition can't, if the window is asked to be removed because of a privacy issue for a house next door where a simple 8-foot fence could do that. We're not proposing the 8-foot fence. We're keeping the same height there. We're still leaving the door open for future good neighbor policy. We're not going in this to try to, my clients are going to live next to this, they're going to be in that neighborhood for quite some time. So really what it comes down to is there the ability to get a view over the top and still have privacy? And I say there is, and that's what I'm proposing.
Can I just, if I may, just kind of clarify. So this 8-foot fence is being proposed from where to where?
Well, this is where it ends, right at the string line.
Yeah, but how far back?
And so it matches the height of the wall about right here.
So this existing
this-
wall ends right here?
Joe's got a good picture, and
Here's where right there.
so this shows you here too, right there, you see that? Okay, no,
Right
okay,
here.
yeah, this
Right
is
here.
right there. So that's the height of the wall, and it continues out just to that point.
Okay, so it's just this piece?
Just that piece.
That you're saying ultimately could be a fence?
Yes.
And just to answer my question, is that the general design of that
Yes.
fence?
It is, and we carry that fence along the property line, but it wouldn't be any higher than the existing wall for, the bulk of where
They're
it
going to
goes.
sit right on, the wall's staying there.
Yes.
The-
So
this
the
wall is
steps-
staying
The
all the
steps
way
and the
back to the
walls are
street.
staying
Right
there,
here,
and
you
this
see that
fence is going to go right on top
That fence
of
is
that.
below.
Okay, so
So
it's in
not-
front of the wall?
It's in front of the wall, and
So
it
you're
doesn't
not
ex-
changing the wall, you're building a fence in front of the wall?
Correct.
Okay, and does that fence, that goes in front of the wall all the way back to the street?
Yes.
Yeah, but it also goes in front of the wall past this point.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I just want to know the extent. So it's going to look like that the whole way? Okay. All right, are there other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Was this provided by
Have to,
the,
That was provided by
Other-
the neighbor.
this is what
Yeah, I'm not sure
Mrs.
what,
Engstrom will see from,
not sure what that is.
okay.
That's a darkened
Darkened version of that thing.
of this,
Oh, there's another. Excuse me,
darkened version of that, from that point there.
they're back, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions?
yes, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. Did you, well, two things. One is, did you have a chance to look at this alternative design that was provided? And two is, did you have a chance to consider at the beginning grading down and making the addition starting out on a lower building piece so that it could still be as high, but it would still be lower?
So I'm going to answer the second one first.
Okay.
We're utilizing the entire foundation and the infrastructure of this property. So this is not a total tear down. So we're actually keeping a lot of the perimeter walls, which are 8-foot high walls, and some of the existing roofing. So there was never a thought about that. In fact, if you were to tear the house down, I would highly suspect it would end up being a lot higher than 13 feet 2 inches. I really would. So I think that the height is actually, probably half of what you could do, even a one-story house there. The first question you had, could you repeat that again?
I just said, did you?
Oh, yes, so I saw that today, and so it's something that we could consider. It's just that it strikes me odd to think that windows on a one-story addition facing a neighbor should be removed because of their privacy issue and their desire to look into this property. It just, I don't know, it strikes me wrong. So, anyway, that's the
Okay.
answer.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes.
To the landscape architect, what size is the fruitless olive you're putting in? I don't see a size indicated.
I don't know if we have that on the plans, but most likely it would be a 36,
Thanks.
be a multi.
And Tom, where's your collection for your swim?
Oh,
your-
okay.
Where is it
I'm glad you
located? I
want
didn't-
someone to look at this. It took a long time to generate it. So this is our Tier 3. So we've got a variety of collection points around the
And
the
where does it go to?
It goes out to the street, most of it.
If you go to the landscape plan, they're on the landscape plan, and I can sort of explain that perhaps.
Okay, here we go.
L1, okay.
You're probably more versed in this than I am.
So what they are, they're little treatment boxes that are on every gutter that comes off the building. And they go into these treatment units, which have a certain amount of storage. And they've done a calculation so that the number that are on the plan satisfy the storage in, in conjunction with some permeable driveway paving, et cetera. And then what we've done on our plan that is not on the civil plan, or it might be now, but it shows that the overflow from that would go into some additional infiltration areas and would be used in the landscape. So the idea is to infiltrate some in the landscape for the plants that are there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, before we go to comments, I noticed Mr. Lamone has appeared, so do you have anything to share with us?
For the next item.
Okay. While you're here, though, I'm glad you're sitting here, because I do have a couple of questions that have been brought up. It's my understanding, in the last discussion we've had with both you and I believe the city attorney, CC&Rs do not apply to our discussion in general. Is that correct?
That's correct. We don't enforce those private CNC at our
We
docks.
strictly pay attention to the zoning code.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the other thing that I think have been told several times is that we can't guarantee we can't guarantee views from individual windows, correct?
That's correct. As you know, that the protection of private views is limited to the degree of, was there consideration given on the design of the project for that purpose? And so you examine the extent of blockage and where those views are from.
Okay, and then my other question regards hedges and fences. It's my understanding that fences can go to from 6 to 8 feet without design review, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that hedges can go to 8 feet without design review, correct?
Correct.
And so if one were want to plant a hedge, that could be allowed to grow to 8 feet. Past that point requires what?
There is an ability to get a joint agreement to have a hedge higher than that between the
Than 8
two
feet.
property owners.
But typically a hedge can go an entire property line at 8 feet, correct?
That's correct.
And that's irregardless of whether there's a fence or not.
Right, and you have the ability to examine these plantings of hedges to see if that would cause a problem or not.
Okay, and do we have the same purview in terms of the height of the fence?
Yes,
Okay,
that's typically a neighborhood compatibility question.
so if an applicant were proposing, let's just say, a 10-foot fence, and we felt that was inappropriate, could we dictate the height?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Lamone while he's here? Okay, then let's go to comments. The applicant is here for design approval and final approval. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few clarifications. There were some things that I think the board should understand just for the purposes of clarification here. As far as the CC&Rs, just for the sake of it, there is no organized association up there. So there's no group that gets together and.
The city has already said we don't.
Right, but there have been some accusations, and
Thank you.
and really the inconsistency with the CC&Rs have to do with a 20-foot setback, which was read out of context on the CC&Rs, which clearly doesn't, if it were to be proposed or dealt with, it would be cutting off all of the homes. along
We're
the same
supposed
line.
to pay attention to the zoning code, not CC&Rs.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And then, so when we did submit to the SFDB, we did go back and forth with a lot of correspondence relative to this latest design. My clients and I received threatening letters of lawsuits and so forth.
Can we just state of the facts, please?
Right. And then one final thing would be The tree, the purpose of that tree is to create, that's the southwest corner. If you've ever had big windows looking at the southwest corner, it is quite a lot of sun comes in. So the purpose is that is a low canopy tree just to squeeze off a view out to the horizon and to provide somewhat of a visor for that situation there. And that's it. That's it.
Okay, to just follow up on that, just to be clear, based on your plan, based on your landscape plan, I'm assuming that olive tree is somewhere like right there in this photograph?
Let's see, that's about right.
About right there? More or less, I mean, within
Yeah.
a few feet. Okay. And then the other question, just to clarify, were these yellow lines generated by computer?
Okay, so they were, I put story poles up, showing it, the poles up, and then I connected the dots
Okay,
with,
so these lines reflect tracing over that photograph?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
but they haven't been computer generated?
no, but those are from the earlier design, not the when it was pulled back 2 feet.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, let's go to comments. Who has comments?
Oh, I
Yes.
have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Is
ahead.
the garage door getting changed at all?
The garage is getting modified. It goes from a 1.5 car to a 2-car garage. So, so right now, you can see, so right now, this is the garage burning, and then this is an open carport, so it becomes a 2-car garage, and then it's in the entrance off to the side.
And the door material?
Door material, it is a painted surface, and the paint will match the color of the window, so it's a deep color.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to comments.
What's the comment?
Yes.
I'd like to see the view out of the new master bedroom, looking southwest.
Looking
Can you
southwest.
give me a picture? Do we have an or how about a floor plan?
Yeah, okay,
How about a
so
floor
that-
plan looking?
Okay, well, you know, this is it kind of there.
Let's look at the floor plan.
Let's look at a floor plan.
Keep going.
Couple more down.
Oh, there we go. So it
Out of the
really
master
isn't
bedroom or out of the bath?
master bedroom. There isn't. Everything looks southeast.
Okay,
Southwest.
It's southeast.
East is in the
Yeah, southeast. So the view is southeast.
okay. Other comments?
Yes.
Yes, Lisa?
Regarding the olive tree, a 36-inch box really is not going to provide much screening for a while. So I would think if you're going to go that route, that a field-grown, crane-planted, established tree, and olives are relatively lacy when they're pruned. So it's not a dense tree, it's an attractive tree.
So you can, theoretically, you can see kind of through it.
Just depending on how heavily it's pruned,
Okay.
really, but a larger tree.
Okay, other comments?
Yeah, I have some comments, Mr. Chair. I'm struggling with this because, granted, we do not have purview of the private views. However, as far as good neighbor policies go, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that there's a animosity between the neighbors and this potential client, and I'd like to see that worked out because of the fact that they brought 2 attorneys here to prove their case. It seems like a very minor issue in terms of revising the bathroom so that everyone's happy, and I understand the architect argument about removing the window, but I don't see it as a big deal. I think you can reduce the size of the bathroom even more and still have a nice bathroom. You know, they've changed the configuration of the bathroom. I think the plan that they suggested is a good one. So I'm tending to feel that the new neighbors should make a stronger effort to follow good neighbor guidelines to so that everyone is happy. I mean, maybe not everyone's going to be totally happy, but
Eliminate that.
it does seem like there's room for compromise here that
Window.
will satisfy the neighbor and satisfy the
This
client.
window up here.
So those are my comments.
Other comments? Okay, if there are no other comments, First of all, I appreciate everyone involved here in having these conversations. And I can understand that the neighbor is upset about their historical view. But part of the challenge this board has is to try to look past the issues of current occupants, whether it's the neighbor or the applicant, because the homes that are built are going to be here probably, in most circumstances, far longer than any of us. And so part of our obligation as a board is to assure, first, neighborhood compatibility with the neighborhood. And in most cases, that means how do these homes look from the street and how do they fit into the street fabric, which is how one looks at and perceives the homes as they stand in the public right-of-way. One of the issues that we're constantly faced with is Santa Barbara has many, many properties with enormous, in a lot of cases, 180-degree views. So there becomes an issue when new homeowners come in and want to modify their home, and in some cases, the adjacent neighbors might lose a bit of that original 180-degree view. So then the question becomes, who has the right? Is it the people already here, or is it the right of the people that buy these properties and want to modify them so that they can have views? So then the board gets into a whole question of who gets to be there first, in my view. And sometimes our decision can be looked at as not being fair, and sometimes it can be looked at as being fair. The other thing is we're constantly dealing with the facts of views from people's windows. And as been pointed out to us several times and just a few minutes ago, we're not obligated to guarantee anybody's private view out of a window anywhere. And in this particular case, I'm not convinced that the neighbor is dramatically losing enormous views. If you look at the rest of this house, they still have most of that other 180-degree view out to the islands, down to City College, down south towards Carpinteria. Yes, they might see a little sliver of view obstructed as they look towards the wharf, but I think most of the views are still there. So I'm having a hard time with that argument. Having said that, I also know, as I pointed out a little earlier, that any future owner, regardless of the current applicant, any future owner can come in here and plant a hedge and let it grow to be 8 feet high all the way out to that corner. In fact, they can make a hedge all the way around this property at 8 feet. So if there's no fence, it still doesn't prevent somebody from putting a hedge up. Now, if the fence is put up strictly as an approach by the applicant to provide the neighbor with a privacy issue to prevent the neighbor from being able to see into those bathroom windows, then one might want to consider the placement of the windows. And it's been suggested, apparently here it is, suggested that the windows could be rearranged. And I'm going to allow others on the boards to make comment on there. I don't believe there's a big difference one way or the other. I don't suspect somebody using that bathroom is going to want that window open while they're using it, or not covered while they're using it. And I also suspect that's the case using the tub, but that's how I perceive the bathroom being used. I think it's unfortunate that we have legal counsel involved in these discussions because it puts the board in a very awkward position of being able to really make a proper judgment call with regards to the architectural appropriateness of the applicant, the size, scale, and bulk, As you all know,
Can I?
can I finish and then I'll allow you to
Yeah, please.
proceed? As you all know, in the city zoning law, one-story houses are allowed to go to 17 feet 6 inches in most all of the city. And part of the reason this is here is this is a one-story project that is in a hillside design district. And the applicant is proposing a roof line in all cases, including the request that we had him modify the roof, I forgot where that roof plan is, that are well below that 17-foot 6 inches mark, and certainly, here it is, certainly on this end of the property, that's considerably lower at, I think it was 10 feet, as I recall, whatever the number is. So I believe the applicant has really gone a long ways in trying to address the concerns of this neighbor. Now, were they able to eliminate any obstruction of any sort of view that historically has been there? Probably not. But does it dramatically decrease this owner from being able to see out to the entire Pacific Ocean?
I appreciate your comments, Fred. However, I do take offense when you say on behalf of the board, because you're speaking on my behalf.
I'm sorry.
And so,
correct me then.
I actually have no problem with this because part of the design guidelines is good neighbor policy. And granted, your designs are good and whatever, and it's not like no one said you cannot do an addition, but they're just saying, in this particular case, they're making a suggestion, and so I'm going by the guise of good neighbor policy that that hasn't been followed through with this new client. As an architect and as a designer, play with the floor plan and see if you can make the windows and the bathroom and the shower optimally great where you can have as much views as possible. And I think you feel like you
We've
have.
done that a few times already. It's always something else and something else. And at some point, I mean, we're going to get appealed anyway, so why give all this just for the purpose of, I mean, no good deed
Well,
goes
I
unpunished?
don't, see now,
The
that's,
neighbor
I
policy
can't
is a
touch that.
two-way
I
street
can't
of
touch
it.
that.
It is a two-way street to do
It's
that.
absolutely, I agree. I agree. So, I don't know, I feel that, Fred makes a valid argument, and now I'm saying what I have to say, so I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Okay, if there are no other comments, the chair would entertain a motion. I think we have several options here. The applicant's requesting project design approval and final approval. We could make a motion that gives the project design approval only, in which case that is appealable. We could give a motion that gives both project design approval and final approval. That action is also appealable. The appeal goes directly to the city council and has to be acted within 10 days of this action. We could request that the applicant return after having further conversations with the neighbor. We could do a different motion that basically instructs the applicant to change the location of the master bathroom windows. And then there may be some other versions of those various motions. So the chair looks to a motion so that we can give the applicant either design approval, design and final approval, and/or other direction.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to continue the project 2 weeks, and in the meantime, the Good Neighbor guidelines are practiced and successfully concluded. And then they come back in 2 weeks with whatever they have, and hopefully the neighbors have met as well, and everybody is on the same page.
That's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second it.
There is a second to that motion. Is there further discussion to the motion?
Chair?
Yes.
I think it would be more clear if you clarify that the intent of the redesign to work with the neighbors is to either relocate windows or to lessen the view impact. What is the purpose of those discussions?
Okay, thank you. And I would go a little further. If I can get the maker of the motion to cover a few items, that in that new discussion, that's to come back in 2 weeks, that you, one, give some direction on the board's view of changing the location of the windows, that the board gives some indication about the any further discussion about a location of a fence and/or landscaping, and that the board gives some indication that the general shape of the current dimensions of the current floor plan are either acceptable or need to be looked at again.
So I have one more comment to make.
Yes.
In review, can we go to page PB1 before we finalize the motion, just so the board knows and that the neighbors know, just to be clear. So that this is the house next door. And notice how big it is. And if you also look at the impact that it has on these people's views. So I think the neighbors need to be a little, especially this neighbor, has to be a little more understanding as to how much they are enjoying as opposed to what Tom is suggesting on their neighbor as well.
Okay.
Before you ratify this motion, I still have some say
Okay.
in this because
Okay, let me get the motion cleaned up, and then I'll let you go to you. So you made the
I
motion,
made the
Mary?
motion.
So if you could clarify, please, based on those items.
But I do want to hear before we vote, I want
Yeah,
to
no, that's
hear
okay,
from
but
him.
I just want to get the motion cleaned up.
Okay,
so that we
well,
know we're-
regarding the items, location of window, I think these are, the reason that we have to continue this is because we don't have the answer to the location of the window. So it's got to be,
you have the answer to
No,
it.
you have the
yes, we
answer.
do. The applicant has offered location for the windows. If the board feels that the windows ought to be rethought, then that's all you need to say.
Okay, I would like the motion to include,
Relocation.
That's exactly what you said.
I'd like to include what Fred just
Okay,
said.
Let me see if
Can
I can do it.
that?
Let me see if I can do that, and if you'll accept the language.
Okay, well, I
then the
wrote it
seconder can
down
accept
if
the
you
language.
want.
So
Okay.
the board would request, upon return in 2 weeks, that they continue dialoguing with the adjacent west neighbor in regards to the location of the windows, make sure we get this into the record correctly, the windows in the master bath that face, where's the north arrow here? I don't see a north arrow. What's that direction?
Southwest.
Southwest, the southwest side of the master bath.
And, no.
Okay? And that the board requests that further discussion occur with regards to the proposed 8-foot fence extending in the direction as identified on sheet S 1.1, and it was on some other drawing somewhere. Site plan drawing, as I recall.
Next sheet.
Is it the next sheet? Nope. Nope.
Tom, you put it in red. Here it is, right here.
Oh, okay, so it's all on the same sheet, okay. So AS 1.1. And that the, I'm believing this is what you're saying, and so Bernie, check me, that the general dimensions as proposed for the master bath are acceptable. Okay. And now I'm trying to remember, what was the other point?
The other one was Brian. What did Brian say?
About the removal of the palm.
No. That the applicant return with reconsideration about the size and species of the olive as proposed in the corner. As it
Size or just this?
size.
Just the
Just
size, not the species.
Not the species, okay. Size is as identified on sheet L-1. Okay, is that language acceptable to the maker of the motion?
That's acceptable.
Okay, is that acceptable to the
Yes.
seconder? Okay, is there further discussion?
Wait, but we were going to hear,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, oh, yeah, so, okay. So for clarification, so the plans in front of you here they're submitted for final approval, design approval and final approval.
Yes.
And they're going to be found to not meet the guidelines and the findings that are required for that approval based upon a window on the ground level facing the side yard and an 8-foot fence that everyone is entitled to. And that's the reason for not approving the project here today. So I could ask for a denial and simply appeal on those conditions, could I not?
You could ask for a denial, in which case that denial could be appealed to the city council. In which case that, as I understand it, becomes a de novo hearing? Is that correct, Mr. Lamone? Or is it-
Yeah, it basically redirects this projects to the council for their decision.
So if either party appeals, then it goes directly to the city council, and then the decision is at the council, and it's called a de novo hearing, which means all bets are off, everything is all up for discussion all over again, okay? So that's kind of, I think, how the issue proceeds. So you could ask for a denial, or you could abide by the motion that's on the floor.
Can I ask for one more thing?
Yes.
Can I ask for a revised motion based on a condition that I place on the project right now for approval?
Which would be what?
To eliminate one of the windows on that west side, the bathroom window, as a condition.
Is that the toilet window or the?
Let's go back to the site plan. Okay.
So what if I were to eliminate this window? Could the board make a finding
Put it in the back?
for design?
I'm just
Just
saying,
eliminate
get
it
rid of period.
well, I guess the question is, does that's one thing, and is that enough to?
Well, here, we have a motion on the floor. It has been first and seconded. So in order to do this, if we were to adhere to the request from the applicant that says, I'm just going to eliminate that window, and therefore, if I eliminate that window, please give me design approval, which is essentially what you're asking for, I think, okay? If that's what indeed he's asking for, then we would have to we'd have to take a vote on the motion on the floor. That vote would have to be either approved or disapproved. If it's disapproved, then we could ask for a second motion that addresses the request of the applicant. So right now, we have a motion on the floor, as outlined, as we've already outlined, and I can have it read back by Kathleen if anybody needs to. But we would need to act on that motion. If the motion is not approved, then we have no motion, and we're back to square one. We then could introduce another motion that could move in the direction that the applicant is requesting, which is eliminating that window.
I think, may I make a comment? I think what, sorry,
That's a
Brian.
procedural
Yeah.
issue.
Brian, I'm not speaking for you.
Okay.
But I think the board is leaning, I think the board is leaning for neighborhood compatibility. And we can't do we shouldn't do what Fred has just proposed, because then we're going to eliminate that good neighborhood policy that we're trying to initiate here.
We've been going back and forth for months, nothing's going to change.
Well, I don't think I think this board is asking that something change, and if you want to eliminate this window, that's fine, and I think your neighbor would like that, but I think it would be nice if you spent 2 weeks, and I seconded the motion, to find out if the neighbor, if you can live with the neighbor for the next 50 years.
Okay?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, yes.
Would eliminating the window eliminate some of the fencing?
No.
I have a question.
Put the-
May I ask a question? Do you forfeit your right for an 8-foot fence in perpetuity on a property, if that's the case, or for a hedge?
You need to talk in the microphone.
Talk in the microphone.
I'm a little bit confused because a fence is not something that triggers design review.
No, that's not correct.
It's not true, okay.
That's not true. Let me explain to you how the difference between a hedge and a fence. You need a building permit for a fence if it exceeds 3.5 feet typically. So you're always going to get some form of design review because you're in a hillside. Now, if this board decides to place conditions for privacy purposes, they can limit the height of fences and hedges. Hedges are kind of difficult to maintain at a certain height, and I think what this board is asking is that you should have that discussion with your neighbors, because there have been cases where you set and agree to the type of hedge and the height of those hedges between properties that maintains privacy and also it allows views.
And Mr. Malone, just to follow up, a hedge doesn't require a permit, correct?
It does not normally, however, when the board has an approval landscape plan, they in fact are essentially giving direction on what's appropriate for that location. So given there's been some discussion about what should belong between property lines, just your discussion would lead us to believe that we're going to have an approved landscape plan that would guide the property.
And we could stipulate in that discussion a height limitation on the hedge?
That's correct.
Now, does some subsequent owner, say a few years from now, a new owner comes to the same property and decides to let the hedge, assuming hedge was proposed and we put some limitation on 5 feet or 6 feet or whatever the number is, some future subsequent owner could buy the property and allow the hedge to grow up, and what happens?
And then there would be a complaint filed that they're in violation of a single-family design board condition that maintains a certain height between property lines. We normally don't want to get involved and be the lead on that. That's why it's best to have the two property line owners have their own agreement.
Okay.
Wait,
Okay,
did you say put a lien on it?
No,
What did you
we
say?
don't. We don't usually want to get involved with that type of condition. It's preferred that the two property owners get their own condition between property owners.
Okay.
So one more question. So we're not proposing a fence anywhere else on the property on this project. So because of that, you're saying that they'll never have the right to put a fence
No.
up anywhere else?
What I'm saying to you is that you'd have to come back and ask this board because you're subject to design review.
Is that right? Okay, so any project that goes through design review at some point and whatever fences are approved or not approved, that goes in,
Until you propose something else, so then it
Until you
has to come
propose something
before
else.
this board again.
even if that item doesn't trigger design review.
It's going to trigger design review because you're in a hillside design district and a building permit is required for those fences.
Okay.
That's what the
A
current
building.
regulation
Okay.
is.
Okay,
We have no
got it.
plans to change it.
Okay.
Okay, and then one other procedural question I need help with. We have an applicant who's thinking about requesting a denial. We have a motion on the floor for a specific direction, i.e. go off, spend 2 weeks, resolve some issues that have been outlined. We have to act on that motion, and it either has to die because it's voted down or it's approved. If the motion is approved, then my understanding is the applicant would have to appeal rather than ask for a denial. How does that work?
Well, the board could open it up again and reconsider the item if there's this alternate motion.
So we could withdraw the motion
Withdraw it or substitute it.
or substitute, okay. All right, so that's the procedural part.
Right.
Okay. I'm just trying to, so does everyone understand that? We have a motion on the floor that gives specific direction to the applicant to return in 2 weeks to do certain things, and I don't want to go through the whole list again. That's been first and seconded. We have to make a decision on that, or in light of, we've heard a comment from the applicant that he'd request a denial, the other thing we could do is have the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion remove the motion from the floor. Otherwise, we have to act on the motion. So does everybody understand what's going on? Mm-hmm. Okay. So
Well, do we want the motion removed? I mean,
I think you have made again, I'll reiterate, the board is leading in that direction of neighborhood compatibility, and
Right.
that's the motion you have made, and I second it. And I think, Fred has come forward and said, and Jaime, you have too, to clarify it a little bit more and lead you this neighborhood compatibility leads you in a direction. I think I'm satisfied with the motion.
Support the motion.
Okay, so I think we have a kind of a straw to keep continuing. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Does anyone need the motion reread?
Has the motion included your?
Let's have it reread.
His
Okay,
comments.
Kathleen, may we have the motion reread, please?
Continue to lease to full board with comments. Provide a more comprehensive application of the Good Neighbor guidelines on the project. Continue a dialogue with the westerly neighbors. Study changing the location of the southwest master bathroom window, which is a privacy concern for the adjacent neighbor. Restudy the location of the 8-foot fence on plan sheet 8.1. Restudy the general dimensions of the master bathroom. Study the proposed insufficient 24-inch size box olive tree and provide a larger size.
I think you said something about dimensions of the bathroom. I think we have concluded that we have concluded that between the two neighbors, they like the dimensions of the bathroom.
So we can take that out.
It was just the window. I don't even know if we want to have restudy the fence.
No, I think the fence could be restudied. I think the fence is.
That was part of the motion.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, does everyone understand the motion? Okay.
We need to.
He seconded.
We had a second.
I got a second.
Was you the second? Okay.
Yes.
Is that correct? Kathleen, we got the first and second are correct? Okay. I would, before we take the motion, I would hope that the neighbor really makes an effort here to get this worked out, knowing that no one is going to get everything they want, either the applicant or the neighbor. This board is bending over backwards, in my opinion, to try to get this resolved so that we don't have to engage legal counsel
Or the city council.
in this discussion.
Or an appeal.
Or an appeal. I think that, because if it goes to council, generally, my view has been that these get very confusing at council, and in fact, most of the times, folks don't come away happy. So let's see if we can get this thing worked out. It's on the board is giving you another opportunity to do that. All right, so without further comment, the chair will ask for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention, so carried. We'll see you in 2 weeks. This will be fine.
You know what, I'm good. What are we going to try it?
Okay,
We're gonna try it.
try it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Give it a good shot.
Okay, let's go
Yeah,
to,
is that yours?
item number 2, 1201 Del Oro.
Tom, some of these are yours and some of them are.
Very well
I think
said.
most of this came in from
Wow.
one of the lawyers.
Yeah, I know.
That's one too. That too.
I tried to turn the heat on. I turned it toward warm.
This is 1201 Del Oro. This is here for a third concept review. This is here for comments only. Project still requires planning commission review for coastal development permit and zoning modification request. The project was last reviewed January 23rd, 2017.
Chair speak.
If you all could introduce yourselves, please.
Tom Meany, architect.
I'm Chris Price with Price Costello and Parma.
Naveen Hopkins, a homeowner.
Joe Hopkins, homeowner.
Of this project?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Okay, we're here for a concept review. Mr. Miller, do we have minutes of our last action? Right here. January 23rd, 2017.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Number one, the board finds unacceptable the proposed size bulk of the house in terms of how the house relates to the rest of the neighborhood.
Sorry. Let me read that again. I apologize. Number one, the board finds unacceptable the proposed size and bulk of the house in terms of how the house relates to the rest of the neighborhood. Number two, further reduce the proposed 99% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio, FAR, to 85% FAR for neighborhood compatibility with the area. Number three, the board finds the proposed zoning modification findings to allow a coastal development permit, 2 setback modifications, and an open yard modification are aesthetically appropriate and do not pose consistency issues with the single-family design guidelines. Action taken by Miller, seconded by Woolery, 5-1 against. Motion was carried. Motisha opposed.
Okay, thank you. So if you could share with us how you address those comments, please.
One minor note, maybe not a minor note, the original application was the 99% FAR. The last time you saw the project, we were at 94.3.
Okay.
Okay.
And today?
We're at 94.3 and looking good.
Okay.
So what I did, I took some additional information in terms of compatibility with the neighborhood, just for my own edification. So here's our survey of our closest 22 neighbors. Actually, I can share that over there. And basically the way the neighborhood breaks out, and it's pretty clearly in terms of the numbers, there's an older neighborhood and then there's a newer neighborhood. The older neighborhood goes from 800 square feet to 1,400. The newers go from 1,800 to 3,400. So in terms of the 22 closest neighbors, right now we're sitting at 6 in our ranking. If you look at the ones that have gone through alterations, we're 6 out of 10. So when we talk about neighborhood compatibility, there's new neighbors and there's old neighbors. And then more specifically, what I looked at was our closest 5 neighbors. These are our 3 neighbors on Del Oro. These are the 2 neighbors on La Marina. So we're basically immediately adjacent to this guy. So in terms of our streetscape, it's these guys, and these 2 houses flank us on La Marina. Coincidentally, when you take the inventory of where these houses fit in our survey of 22, they're right here. Boom, 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 boom. So of our 5 closest neighbors, we're 3 out of 6. And they mentioned the 85% FAR number. If that were imposed on us, we would go from 6 in our ranking all the way down to 7. So in terms of neighborhood compatibility, I think we're pretty good numerically. And then additionally, where I think we look exceptionally good, is the size, bulk, and scale. So numerically is one evaluation, and then size, bulk, and scale we hear about so much is probably a more important evaluation. So here we are. This is this guy. That's the third guy. And here's number 2.
Let's do this so that the camera can see it. Which one is which? That one. So that's this house?
Right.
That's this house?
Exactly.
That's that house, okay.
So here you're right here, and here's our property line and our setback and our curb. So when you're looking at size, bulk, and scale, we're lower than our 3 neighbors. We have a more aesthetically pleasing profile. The only place we have a 2-story face is actually right here where it's a 1.5-story face. Compare that to this with the gable, these 2-story faces, this massing. We have our second floor is broken up by 1-story roof elements. Our roof line is faceted. We use hips instead of gables. So even in terms of a size, bulk, and scale aesthetic, I think this diagram shows that we are compatible with our neighborhood. And in my personal opinion, we're much more aesthetically pleasing in terms of the size, bulk, and scale. So there were a couple changes that we made from the last meeting that I want to evaluate. One question was whether or not we can take any additional square footage out of the project. Keep in mind, we did come down quite a bit from the last meeting, and we also reduced our height. So one exercise I went through was to draw furniture into the floor plan and see where is there inefficiency that could be trimmed. So these bedrooms have already been compressed from the first revision. Bathrooms are compressed. The stairs were tightened up. All these rooms were tightened up to take our square footage down. So these bedrooms are not large by any stretch of the imagination. Here's a 4-foot table, 2 love seats and a chair, queen-size bed. This island is 36 inches by 36 inches. It's not huge. Upstairs, the master is not generous. The little den is 10 feet across. It's not generous. So there's really not a lot that we can compress out of this without taking square footage out of the house. One comment that was made was our elevations. Remember, we had the primary elevations. Here's our street view, solar angle, our neighbor, solar angle. Here's the back side with the solar angle and our streetscape. with our massings articulated on each side. And there was a comment that maybe we needed to take and added some finesse to that side yard property, even though this is heavily vegetated. And so what I did is to that elevation, I took this from a gable to a hip. I added some buttressing, some ironwork, a little plaster grill. So I added some articulation to this elevation to bring it up to the same standards as the other elevations. So basically that's where we are. We looked at it, taking out square footage. We can't really do that without taking off a room. My further investigation in terms of compatibility with the neighborhoods, I think aesthetically we are better than the neighbors. Numerically, we're right where we should be. And we want to play this thing out.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to present?
Not for me.
Okay, thank you.
You guys want to introduce yourselves and speak briefly?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Speak in so people can hear you.
Sure. I'm Abby Hopkins, and I just wanted to say a couple of personal notes that this project reflects a long-anticipated plan to return to Santa Barbara, the city where I was born and raised, and actually to the home where I was raised here on Del Oro at 1201. My parents were original owners in the property, which back then was called Marine Terrace. They purchased it in 1951. And I just want to say we love the Mesa, we love the neighborhood. It was wonderful then, and we think even though it's changed a lot, it's still just a very wonderful neighborhood. That it's very important to me that we have a house that's really beautiful and really respects the privacy and views of our neighbors, and we feel like we've really accomplished this. We've worked really hard for that. I'm not an architect, but with respect to where the second story sits and how big it is, and it's back from both sides of the corners, it was very important to us to not put a big box there that was going to impair any views of our neighbors. And then the last is just that we have a large family, 4 kids, 2 sets of grandkids, more grandkids coming, and we'd really love to have a home where we could have our family out for extended stays and just continue the kind of the legacy that we have here in Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'm Joe Hopkins. I own that property with my wife, Abby, who just spoke. I'm looking forward to retiring to this property after many, many years of a lot of hard work and enjoying my grandkids and family. I would also note that the house is built to accommodate aging in space, which means the lift is there, the hallways are a little wider. There needs to be room for potentially, although my wife and I are currently very, very healthy, I'm a geriatrician and I understand the implications of things that could happen in terms of how much space is required for wheelchairs, walkers, an attendant walking with an individual. And I don't think we can go any smaller and keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, finally, I just wanted to just summarize. I think Tom put together this table, which is very, very useful. And as you know, neighborhood compatibility is a very difficult thing. This came up in your last item, in fact. And I think Tom is giving you some very, very helpful objective numeric standards as well as photographic evidence here on how, there's no, 85% is not the magic bullet in this neighborhood. If we went to 85%, we'd go down and rank one space here. But looking in context, not just the numbers, but also what's in the neighborhood, I think we fit very, very well, and it's a well-designed house. So I'm pretty confident that you could make the findings for compatibility for this design at our 94%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before we go to questions of the board, is there anyone in the public wishing to address this project? Katie, did we get any written communication?
No, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no one come forward, the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. But before we do that, since Mr. Lamone is sitting here and Katie's sitting here, could you share with us the 85% voting criteria? Is this one of those that we have to do a majority or a 5 vote?
No. What I was here for is that anytime I see a motion from this board that directs an applicant to reduce a project to 85%, I get a little concerned because it was never intended to be a requirement for all projects. And so I would like to have you emphasize that what is it about the design that you find too large, bulk scale, mass-wise? And that should be the direction as to what generates a solution that involves reduction of square footage. It should not be just square footage. So they've responded, indicated that it's very difficult to continue to further reduce it, and I would just ask that you focus in on the size, bulk, and scale issue.
Thank you.
Okay, while we're on the subject, this house, does it still have the basement? And the basement's not included in the FAR at all?
Not.
Not at all?
Never
Okay.
is.
How big is the basement? How many square foot approximately?
It's like 600.
100?
Yeah, just guessing. It's on the
Is it
front sheet.
underground completely?
Completely.
That's why it's not counted.
Basically, all the new work we're doing is conforming to the setbacks. So all of our second story is conforming to the setbacks. The existing house actually encroaches, so our new addition is conforming to the setbacks, and even the basement is conforming to the setbacks.
I think also, to follow up, Jaime, the 85% is a guideline in terms of, once it goes past 85%, it kicks into a different criteria. That's the only reason.
As it should.
It kicks into a different criteria based on the size, bulk, and scale. And if it exceeds 85%, there usually means that the building possibly has a bigger impact on the neighborhood. So I can be perfectly comfortable that the basement is not included in the 85 because there is no size, bulk, and scale impact on a basement. At least that's my feeling on the matter.
Okay, let's go to other questions, and then we can go to comments. Lisa, do you have a question?
Yes, you've shown the streetscape of Del Oro as far as how the houses relate as far as size, bulk, and scale. I was wondering if you might have a similar study that shows that impact along La Marina.
I could do that. We have, the buildings are further apart from each other because of the setbacks. So it's less of a streetscape, so to speak, but I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Other questions?
Missing one.
I do have a, just to go through this exercise, let's go back to your little, you reduced it, when you first came, I believe it was, you said 99%.
99.9.
Or whatever, close to 100%.
Yes.
When you reduced it on this size project, on this size lot, going through the little logarithmic thing that's on the city's website, get to 94%, how many square feet did you take out, more or less? Do you recall?
Off the top of my head, it was like 200 maybe.
200. So if, and you mentioned a few minutes ago, if you were to go from 94 to 85, how many more square feet?
I haven't calculated that. It's taking out rooms at that point.
Okay, but is it another 100 square feet or another 200 square
Probably
feet?
170 or something like
Okay,
that.
so 170 is, let's just say it's 150. That's a 10-foot by 15-foot rectangle.
One room.
That's kind of what we're talking about here. If we were insistent on doing 85, okay. I just want to get perspective. You know, when we talk about larger projects and 85% on larger lots, the square footage calculations get different. When you're talking about a house on a small lot, and you run that calculation through, the square footages are relatively small. To move from one percentage to another percentage, is you kind of, because you can take that program and just plug in the numbers and it keeps kicking it out. Okay. Let's see, could you remind me, I thought we had a preliminary kind of landscape approach somewhere?
Yeah, yeah, that's unchanged from their earlier submittal.
So that's all kind of staying the same.
Exactly.
And
all the street trees, as you recall from our photo simulation, this house is
right.
very much.
And you kind of addressed some of the concerns we had about how this side looked. And I don't believe you did too much different than last time on the front, correct? You know, on this elevation. So those are kind of basically what we saw last time. Okay.
Right.
All right. Other questions?
Footprint of the new resident, the remodel is the same as pretty much the same? Show me the...
Of the existing house?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it back on. Actually shows those two superimposed. Here's our existing. So the dashed in is the new square footage on the first floor. Keep in mind, the existing house is permitted with no covered parking. So we're providing 2 covered parking. And then the dashed line is the second floor footprint as it relates to these existing setbacks. So you can see how we're basically respecting the setbacks on the second floor.
But the first floor is basically the same as the house was there before, but it's except for the new additions here and here.
There, correct.
Here and here.
And then the second floor is
right there. Yeah.
Here. So the second floor is much smaller than the first floor, and we're pulling away from
That's new additions. Yeah.
pulling away from the building mass, especially from the 3 sides where it's most visible.
So none of the new additions is closer to the road. It's all back. It's back lot. And
Correct.
Right there.
And conforming to all the setbacks.
Did you say there's 2 covered parking places?
It's tandem.
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 In the garage?
Inside the
Yes.
garage.
And the existing has 0 covered parking.
And just to remind everyone, in our last motion, the board generally agreed that the modifications being requested were appropriate from an aesthetic and compatibility standpoint. And so, as I understand it, you still have to go get the modification, and
Correct.
you still have to do the coastal. So your primary focus today is to get positive comments to be able to move to that next step.
Correct.
Is that
That's our
where-
objective,
Where you're
our hope.
trying to go, okay.
I think the last, I've forgotten who made the first came up with the comment of size, bulk, and scale, and we asked you, tell me if I'm right, we asked you to reduce it down one time already, and you have reduced it down.
Right. And
then we asked you to reduce it down again, and that generated the reason for the mass, bulk, and scale, because the FARs were, we thought, too big.
And the first exercise for me was to do the furniture plan to see, okay, where can we pinch it further without eliminating rooms? And at the point where it's just tight.
Very good, thank you.
How many bedrooms is the home?
It's 1 bedroom upstairs and 2 bedrooms downstairs.
Three bedrooms.
3 bedrooms and the great room, and then there's a den and...
Well, there's a little office upstairs. It's
Office.
14. It's 10 feet by 14 feet. You couldn't really put a bed in there. So it's a 3-bedroom house. They're going to use this as a TV room, but the city would count it as a bedroom.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, if not, let's go to comments. As I think we just clarified, the applicant is wishing for positive comments so that they can proceed to the staff hearing officer for modifications.
Okay, I wasn't against size bulk, that it was too big in the last time you presented it. I thought it looks very nice. And I think what you've done and the presentation you've made, and worked with a lot of architects, probably do something that's makes the corner look very nice, and the buildings are and the building that you propose is much smaller and in a better architecture than what's there, and I would support what you've presented today.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I'm just going to kind of follow up on Joe's comment. You know, part of the struggle, and I appreciate the fact that you indicated I grew up in this house. Part of the struggle, as I'm sure you may have heard, if you've lived away from Santa Barbara for a while, is this neighborhood, because this neighborhood triggered the existence of this board. And the reason was people were coming in and tearing down your mom and dad's house and building brand new houses and making them really big, and a whole bunch of folks in the community said, that's it, we're going to have everything reviewed. And so the board was part of the reason this board was created. And so one of the things that's always a challenge is we don't know without doing some research when these other houses were approved. Because some of these could have been approved before this board existed. And part of the reason, as I just said, that, you know, those kind of houses probably might not.
We approved this is Tom Oxner, I remember that one.
Whatever, but some of these may not have been, you know, approvable today. But, you know, that's part of the challenge. So, having said that, I think this helps tremendously in terms of understanding the street fabric in terms of the scale and bulk, because part of the, what scale are we at? Part of the challenge here is kind of understanding how these homes look to the human scale. And this neighborhood particularly is a challenge because we have all of these other houses that were either built with our approval or without our approval. And so that's the thing that ultimately we kind of have to look at, and we have to look at in the context of knowing that these things are going to get landscaped and they're going to get trees and they're going to do all those nice things and make homes look good. So I think that's part of the challenge. One advantage of the tandem parking is we don't have to look at a big two-car garage door. So from that aspect, that's a plus. But more importantly, I think the architect has pointed out the fact that the ridge lines now have dropped considerably, and the plate lines have dropped. And one of the things that always helps on these drawings is if you can indicate the plate lines. Oops. So I can kind of see where things are. So, I mean, just on that sketch, but I think you may have done it on your other sketch. Yeah. So he's indicated where plate lines are.
This section is a 5-footer on the second floor.
So he's really dropped that down. And this is, in my view, that's the kind of things, that's the advantage of doing this style of architecture, because you're able to drop the plate heights to get this squeezed down. Because remember, part of our enamorization with this style of architecture is it came from farmhouses in Spain where they didn't put a lot of material in here because, one, they were short, two, they only wanted to build what they had to build, and why build 6 more feet when a few less feet kind of gets us where we need to be. So that kind of behooves the approach to the architecture. So from that standpoint, I think we're close to there. As I pointed out already, we could continue to try to hammer on the FAR, but to get a functional 3-bedroom house, that's going to be a little tougher. And I was just taking my scale to the room sizes, and they're not really out of line. I mean, you could take another foot out of here, but you see where and that's a queen size, and that's not a king size bed. You go to a king, there's another foot in here. So I think we're kind of there, but I'll leave it up to the rest of you.
Well, Mr. Chair, I do appreciate all the effort. I'm undecided at this very moment, mainly because we have a 6,000 square foot lot, 6,098 square feet. It's one of the smaller lots. And I'm pretty sure that all but one of those houses that is being considered the newer wasn't built after our board, wasn't approved after we were already here. So we do want to be a little bit careful. I think that this architect came in with a ridiculously large house, and now he comes in with, but we did this and this. I mean, this could have been easily a starting point as well. And I'm just really concerned about preserving this neighborhood. So when people walk by going to Shoreline Park and they see this big tower, that's something to think about. How tall is it? How does it scale with people?
You're suggesting that, quote, there's not one Spanish house anywhere near here, and all of a sudden we're putting a Spanish.
Well, that's another
thing.
It's a mix.
I wasn't saying that negatively. I was saying it positively because I'm a person who likes to have different architecture in the same. Everybody knows that, and I don't think three reasons. One, nobody's going to walk by this corner and look up at a tall building because there's so many trees on this corner. It's the most landscaped corner in any place on the Mayo.
Yes.
I mean, it's massive. There's nothing but trees on the whole corner.
If I were to sketch this, there would be
So are the trees going to stay there?
Yeah, there's
The computer model in here.
In fact, if you walk down the sidewalk and you may not even see the house. That's it there.
This is the house.
And that's on Bill Orr. And we're looking down. marina over there. And two, I think in the past, this board is kind of swayed by the fact that we have people in the audience who live right next door or all around the houses are objecting to the mass size and bulk and scale, and two, the architecture, and I don't see anybody here objecting to it. And I don't know, I don't dictate that the board should make the decision on who cares and who doesn't care, but I like the house. I like the house. And I think it's not overly sized for the neighborhood.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to clarify the record that anything within 85 to 100%, we wouldn't consider ridiculously sized.
Yeah.
We consider that within the target range. What was ridiculous was what caused the NPO, which we had 35 to 4,000 square foot houses on these lots. And now we have a containment of FAR restrictions that allows persons to come in with a more on-target range home.
I think it's
so 2,500 square feet home on these lots is an acceptable range. Now, whether the architecture and the size of bulk scale are acceptable, that's before you today.
So I'm ready to comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Based on what I've heard, I can support this project. I think it's a very well-designed home.
Okay. Do I have any other comments?
Yes. I feel the applicant has done a good job meeting our guidelines, and I can be in support of it also, despite the higher than 85% FAR.
Okay. Hearing no further comments, the chair would entertain a motion. Anyone prepared to make a motion?
Oh, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move to...
The motion can either be to comments to return to the board, or the motion can be in positive comments to what's been presented so that the applicant can proceed to the staff hearing officer for the modifications. We can't give a project design approval or any action like that today.
So if you could comment specifically on each of the mods, please, in the motion. Yeah.
And I think there was 2 modifications. Can we go back? Yes. We have to make comments on each modification separately.
Okay, the board would like to continue the project to the staff hearing officer with positive comments. The board feels that the size, bulk, and scale of the project is appropriate with the neighborhood and feels that quality of materials were used. The board also, let's see, how's this worded? There's a thing here about supports the modification as aesthetically appropriate. The proposed modification does not pose any consistency issues with the following design guidelines or required findings. Those modifications are as follows: that the structure is built in the current front yard setback is supportable, that the
Just one story in there.
and which is a one-story addition.
That's in our existing footprint.
Okay, so the 2 mods are again this one?
Yeah.
And
That 2 sides.
2 sides?
That's one.
Oh, that's one.
okay.
The second one was the rear yard configuration. And it was, we didn't meet the minimum dimension, and we said, well, we could, if you wanted to, slide the garage forward to this line, and we can meet it. And you said, no, we'd rather keep the garage back here and just...
So
The
it's
board supports the
acceptable.
configuration of the open yard area. And what's the third one?
That's it.
And that's
Just 2 modifications.
That's my motion.
Returns back to full board, returns back to full board.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
return back
return
to
to
the
the full
board.
board,
Okay,
yes.
Return to the full board. And then before you complete that motion, would you read into the fact that I think you believe you said the acceptability FAR is at 94.3%.
And the board accepts the 94.3 FAR is acceptable.
Okay.
And it's consistent with the neighborhood.
Okay, so that's the motion on the floor. I have a second to my right. Is there further discussion to the motion? Hearing none, Cheryl, call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstention? So carried. Okay, we will see you back here after you go through your modification.
Thank you. Did the tie help? I wanted us to be on equal terms here.
High helps.
He's very intimidating.
High helps, thank you.
Thank you.
But it isn't Notre Dame blue and gold, I'm sorry. Okay, we've requested a break. Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll return at about 8 minutes after the hour.
Bernie vote against that?
A third concept review, it only requires comments because it still requires staff hearing officer review for zoning modification and was last reviewed on January 9th, 2017. If you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Paul Rubison. I'm with Appleton Partners.
Okay.
And I was going to actually unroll this drawings because the client asked about an updated elevation for the garage door. So I wanted to bring that while we were here today. So as we've been preparing for the...
Okay, before you proceed,
yes,
I'm going to have Mr. Miller read comments of our last action, please.
Okay. Again, Mr. Chair. Number one, the board appreciates the general overall design and architecture and
The board appreciates the general overall design and architecture, and the project has consistency in appearance and follows good neighbor guidelines. Number two, the board finds the proposed 2 front setback modifications and an open yard modification are aesthetically appropriate and do not pose consistency issues with the single-family design guidelines and findings. Number three, reconsider the use of ficus plantings for a hedge material and provide extra care and consideration for the front yard in preparation of a revised landscape plan. Number four, provide transportation division staff review and approval. Action taken by Bernstein, seconded by Miller. Motion was carried.
Thank you. Okay, so if you could share with us how you addressed those comments, please.
So as we've been preparing for our modifications, there's just been a few items that have come up that Betsy Teeter had asked for me to come to the board and ask for direct comments on. Those items include the driveway at the front of the house, which extends from the property line across the full front. This is the survey, and what we are proposing is a reduction. We're going to remove a good portion of that, and there is landscaping proposed for the front. And what we'd like to do is keep this portion of the drive intact. The garage is right here, and the clients wanted some off-street parking. Now, as part of this, we went back through historical documents going back to the 1976 design for the house, and they had more of a circle drive. This was never constructed. Betsy reviewed some satellite photos, and it has always been concrete all the way across the front. I actually have a photograph just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like today. So we're going to soften this up. We're going to make it, fit the road. And what we would like to do, though, is keep this portion of the driveway. And for the modification, they wanted the board's comments. We did meet with transportation on this, and they asked for us to just make sure that we had a 10-foot by 20-foot triangle where nothing is above 42 inches high, so that you have visibility down the road, and that actually works to our client's benefit. That's no problem for us to comply with that. The other comment that came up with Betsy was that the drawings are showing just a single balcony across the back. That is not how it was actually constructed. When you look at the historical drawings, it never really addressed the extreme slope change from this part of Loma Media to where Loma Media wraps on the backside of the house. So when they built this deck, it did extend on the side to meet grade, and they also had a lower deck, which was not shown in these drawings. So they wanted the board to comment on the fact that we would like to keep the deck, and as we had discussed during the January 9th hearing, we do want to extend the deck out so you can actually have a usable deck on the back. There's not much usable yard on the property. So what we were proposing is a 7-foot deck. We reviewed it with our structural engineer, and he said that that was as much as we could extend the deck out. And so that's what we'd like to propose, is that it's a 7-foot extension, and we are going to keep the deck on the side as well as the lower level deck. And I can show you that on the floor plans. So the lower level, we have each sheet has as-built drawings and proposed drawings laid out. So we are keeping the same footprint. We aren't changing the footprint anywhere. Most of what we have done and what we've reviewed with you in the past is we're swapping out doors and windows to have dual glazing, making some modifications to the detailing. The board had commented that the building as it is doesn't have a lot of character to it, so what we're doing is we're adding some detail to this to make it a nicer building, but keeping the same footprint and the same size of the project. We have crawl space on the lower level, below the lower level. Lower level has bedrooms and bathrooms, and then on the upper level, we are making some modifications to the kitchen, powder room and laundry configuration, and here you can see the deck extension here. We also have proposed a roof over the entry door as you come in off of the front yard. Again, this is Loma Media. This is the drive to the garage. So these are the elevations. These are pretty much exactly the way they were when we reviewed them last in January, but we have shown the client would like to replace the garage door with something that's a little nicer. We've got some building sections showing just the layout, door and windows, a few renderings that we reviewed with you. And then we have made a few modifications to placement of the hedge along the street, and what we had reviewed with you previously was doing some more planting on the lower side to kind of soften that elevation, because that's the taller elevation that you see.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go, before we go to questions to the board, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address this project? Katie, did we have any communication?
No, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no one come forward, the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. Just so I'm clear, one of the things we had asked in our last meeting was reconsider the use of the ficus plantings for the hedge material. And did you do that? What, if that's changed?
Yeah, let's see. So we have.
Whether Prunus Carolina come back with it?
Yeah, right here, Prunus Carolina. So that's your response to the hedge?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We have removed all ficus from our schedule. So yep.
And then, okay, so landscape plan for the front yard. We asked for that. You've provided that. You've had things reviewed by the Transportation Division, so that's taken care of. Okay. So, other questions?
Driveway. Well, before that, it was all concrete front, so you backed out right there. You just drove out and looked both ways.
Yes. Right. This is the.
Now your landscaping is coming to that point right there.
Right.
And you will come back out of the driveway or the garage.
Mm-hmm.
You must be off.
No, I'm on. I'm on.
Maybe I've got it turned up.
No, you've got it on mute.
Says I'm not mute.
Oh, that's because this button has to go off.
Oh, okay, yep.
Now you're
That's
okay.
it. Okay, now I can hear myself. So now you definitely, if there's if there's cars parked right there, which are off-street parking, you will definitely have to back out and back onto the street to. Okay.
Right.
I'm
yeah.
just stating a fact.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions?
Did you say what the roof material would be?
For the roof, we're matching the existing.
Oh, okay.
So.
Looks like asphalt.
Asphalt shingles.
Yeah.
And you mentioned also that some new material for the garage door, but you didn't say what you were thinking, or wood, or,
He's got a picture of it.
oh, he has a picture. Let's see it. Thank you.
It's wood with glazing in it right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we
okay.
wanted to have some windows here.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
okay, that
Whereas
makes sense.
previously it was like a board and back kind of
Okay.
system.
Thank
This
you.
gable here is existing.
It is.
The one in the back.
Yeah, the only one
You're
that
just
we're
adding the front one.
is this one right here. Yeah.
You're adding the front.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so just to be clear, so Betsy, we want to talk about the driveway, I want to go back to that in a minute.
Yes.
I think what Betsy is indicating is that the original drawings don't show these balconies as being approved, so they're not permitted.
Yeah.
Is that what she's saying?
So she wants to include them as part of the modification at this time.
Okay,
Yes.
so we need to make a comment, if we're in agreement with what you're proposing, that the non-permitted balconies as they exist are okay, and that you're extending this balcony.
Yes, that's correct.
You're not extending that balcony, but you're extending that balcony.
Yeah.
And then we have to make the general aesthetic decisions. So, okay, I just want to make that clear. Now, going back to the site plan, I can get there.
That's right
So,
here.
It's the lower one that's going out, not the higher one. No.
It's the higher one
It's
right
the higher
there,
one.
see?
Oh, the lower one is out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's built this way.
It's built that
But
way.
it wasn't permitted that way.
Gotcha, okay.
So
Good,
what city planning wants to bring that to our attention so we're clear of what's being approved. But in terms of, we have basically 20 feet here for, there could be 2 parking spaces here, and that's roughly 22 feet, if I'm scaling this correctly. So that could easily accommodate a couple of cars, and you still have, but this currently is all paved all the way over to here. As part of the city's approval, will you have to take this out? I'm assuming that's paved at this point. That's
I
part of that.
I believe that is actually
It's off
part
the-
of the neighbor's route to go down steps to
So-
access the lower yard.
But these are even, correct? So do you have to take that out, or does that get to stay?
That gets to stay. That's on the neighbor's
So
property.
that's off this picture, okay.
Yeah, this railing right here is that.
Okay.
Wait, since you brought up the neighbor, what, is there, have you talked to the neighbor about this and the deck and all?
I haven't, but Ken Minot from our office, he's one of our partners, actually lives here, and he's been communicating with the neighbors.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, no questions, and let's go to comments. The applicant is, I'm assuming at this point, what you're trying to achieve is positive comments so you can proceed to the staff hearing officer with regards to modifications or that are for here, here, two? Do you have to get a third one? No? Your modifications for here and here, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we did find as we started going through historical documents is in 1976, there's a resolution for a 20-foot setback on this side and a 15-foot here. Betsy did point out that our roof does extend into that setback area, but she thought that that was, from her viewpoint, acceptable. But again, you know, we want to make sure that everything that needs to go into the modifications to make this all legal and conforming at this time, we wanted to address.
Was there also an open yard modification? Is that what?
She had asked about
It says an open yard modification. So
Right.
there's that.
The documents reference it, but there wasn't a clear delineation of what that meant. So what we did is I calculated with Betsy the open yards on both sides, and she said it needed to be 1,250 square feet or greater, and we're at 1,443 square feet.
If
So
you take those together.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, so we have already indicated in our last motion that we were okay with the proposed modifications from an aesthetic standpoint. So that was already kind of
But
voted
the
on the last.
previous one, we didn't have the 7-foot thing coming out, right? Or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the
We
deck was,
showed it, but we didn't define it as the full 7-foot length. We
Okay.
wanted to meet with our structural engineer and make sure that we had a distance we could give you that was buildable.
Got it.
They showed an extension, but it
Yes.
wasn't fully defined.
Yeah.
You have a picture of the back right there. Could I look at that?
It's on page 1.
Yeah. Well, we also,
No.
we do have,
Oh,
let
your
me see what else I've got
existing
here.
picture. Right there.
This
That's
one
the
right here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, the elevations. We have that one right there.
Oh, yeah.
Go to your existing elevations, or new elevations there. There you go.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's it's gonna change.
So this changes.
And this is what's gonna look up there, with landscaping from this point on down.
That's correct.
Which we had asked for before, but we didn't
Yeah.
have a clearly defined landscape plan, and they've now provided that.
So this is this.
Yeah. That's
And
what's
is this
new.
going to stay like this, or
No,
the
it's gonna
landscaping?
be like
Oh,
this.
lattice?
Close it in there.
There's a landscape plan for this now, and we had asked that the lattice material be put in there from the last discussion.
We've got a tree that we're gonna put in here to kind of soften that.
Okay, got
You're
it. Thank you.
changing, this is now gonna be doors all the way across there.
Well, yeah, currently there's sliding doors with windows, and we're gonna do
With your
a
deck,
pair
you're
of
putting a
sliding
deck.
doors, so it's more accessible.
Yeah. I drive up back there all the time, and I notice it. Good improvement.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments?
Yes, I have comments. Are we on
Yes.
comments?
Yes.
If you go to sheet 9, I have a little concern. Let me keep your photograph with the real
Yeah,
one.
definitely.
Yeah, beautiful rendering. And then visually speaking, this kind of looks uncomfortable as it sticks out 7 feet. Is there a possibility you can extend some kind of post so it looks a little more traditional? I think because it's a highly viewable house, having it kind of lever out like that kind of makes it a very contemporary, inconsistently. It would, I think, be a little more comfortable if you had some kind of post on that cantilever to just make it look a little more.
Like it's not going to fall down?
Yeah.
So you're dealing with, even though the structural engineer says
Said
we
it's
can go out-
fine,
we can go out 7 feet.
it's gonna look
Visually,
strange.
it
It's
looks like-
disturbing.
Disturbing,
Yeah.
right, that's where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Okay.
This deck here is not as far out as that.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
So you could, say 1, 2, 3 with a beam
Right.
across there.
If you did,
we could, it would-
here, this section right here would share. So where is it? Just had it, looking through.
You had it.
I had it, where'd that section go?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
So if you were to do that,
It's gonna
then
come
then the post would go like that.
a couple feet back from the edge of that
Which I
one.
think would work. That would work,
So
don't you think?
that's where a post would be.
And then a beam underneath.
Something
Well,
like that.
whatever, yeah, beam and a post or whatever.
It might make it, like Brian says, it would make it look more appealing, like it's going to stand there instead of falling over.
Even though
Instead
the
of-
structural
even
engineer
though
has
the
assured
structural-
us that it's not going to fall
Right.
down.
Is it a wood deck, or what's the deck
It's a
made
wood
out
deck,
of?
yeah.
And the railing?
The rail is it's steel. It's
And
wrought
it-
iron.
Wrought iron rail.
And
And
it's
I'm also-
open, and water goes through it. It's not,
Yes.
not,
It's
That's correct.
it's a very viewable house too. So if you were like up behind a hill and no one sees it, I wouldn't care. But
Yeah.
in this case, I think something a little more aesthetically pleasing there would really make a
we
difference.
hide those pictures. We hid them someplace. There.
And we'd have to look and see about, because we don't want to compromise the
The
structural
windows.
integrity of those posts that are currently supporting the lower deck.
I don't know.
I don't think that they're not going to be supporting anything.
Because
Because
it's
the
actually
structural
set-
engineer has already
Right,
assured
right.
you that it's going to stay up there. All we're doing is aesthetically putting some posts.
Right, but this is actually set back from the edge of the deck, so for it to stack post on post, it would be kind of in the walking
In the
path a
walks,
bit,
yeah.
and not, it'd be one thing if it was like centered on the rail.
And I think that, but what I'm
This
just
one,
trying to get-
shows that they're right out.
Well, but even if it's back of the rail, I think what you're all concerned about is, one of the ways to do this is to show a post there, post there, and a post there.
Great.
Not every, not all, but I think that's kind of what is making you
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
it brings a lot of balance. It looks great, yeah.
And yeah, that may sit in plan, the railing will go like this, and the post may have to go back like right here. This is the wall with the doors or whatever, sliding glass door, I guess. See what I'm getting at?
It's aesthetically,
It's just an aesthetic issue.
thing, so they could come right out. They could be right underneath, or right above that, in line with that railing right there. And your elevation shows that is, basically, this is back,
Right.
should be
this
back
is
a little bit.
In enclosing it, we are bringing it. So we
You are
could
bringing
do
it.
it in the detailing of it where it looks
Propose it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You work for Appleton, he
Yeah,
knows
we're
what to
not-
do.
Right,
He's
right.
very good in
Have to do
traditional
it.
architecture.
Okay, the other question I have for my colleagues is, I'm a little, they're going to this nice effort to really fix the front of this house, which we asked them to do, and I think this is really goes a long way. I'm a little concerned that I would much rather see, 'cause I know they're trying to get 2 parking spaces, and, 10 feet is a nice, generous parking dimension. I mean, a city parking lot's 9 by 18, but, so even 10 by 20, they can still get, those are nice parking. I'm just thinking that somehow we ought to landscape or do something to this area.
Right.
Rather than, because they've done such a nice job over here to balance this, it just seems like there ought to be something, even if it's just like that.
Yeah. I think we can make that work.
It still gets their 2 spaces.
What, you mean like maybe drought tolerant
Well,
stuff?
whatever
or
they're landscaping over here is
Some,
same
something,
material over there.
yeah,
Because if they don't, we're going to end up with just concrete over there.
yeah.
Which
Yes.
looks really bare.
They're going through
That's
so
what
much
that-
effort to get this all fixed up.
I think we could definitely soften that edge up a little bit and still have the parking. Yeah.
All right, are there other comments?
It's back to a question.
Okay.
The choice of a magnolia tree, is there a specific reason why you chose that? The rest of your palette is pretty
Yeah.
much different vernacular, and the magnolia doesn't seem to fit, and there are existing oaks, so I was wondering if,
I believe it was something that the client liked, and we felt like it would be a significant enough size to soften that elevation. I can't really speak on behalf of my landscape
for a really
architect,
long
but
time, they grow slowly, and
Yeah.
you only have a 36-inch box, so
yeah.
that won't, oak trees grow fast in the first 10 years.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
just something to consider.
Yeah, I can talk to our landscape architect about that.
Okay, the applicant's here because they want to proceed to the staff hearing officer for all of these modifications. So the chair is going to entertain a motion. I would suggest that if we're inclined to approve what's been presented, that we could add the comments like consideration of a different tree type or the post on the elevation. Those all could be individual comments, but I see we could craft a motion that would allow them to proceed to the staff hearing officer with those comments so that when they do return, they've addressed the tree and the post or whatever, and the additional landscaping in the driveway. That would certainly address city planners' questions, et cetera. And then also in that motion, whether or not this project comes back to the full board or onto a consent calendar for the rest of the process. So the chair would entertain a motion.
1 second, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
did you bring a color board with you? Like for the color of the siding, or is it going to be matching what's existing, all painted, or?
Right now, we're proposing matching what we have. I'm trying to remember if we had one at the last hearing.
I think you indicated you were going to kind of match the existing color.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
all right.
the final color board will come as, because they
at
have
the-
to get project design approval.
Yeah.
They can't do that until they go get the modification.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. if we're
Yes.
Ready for that? I will move to continue the project on to proceed to the staff hearing officer with the following comments. The board accepts the two modifications, the 15-foot and 20-foot setbacks modifications. We would appreciate you return to consent.
Up to you, you're making the motion.
Okay, to consent with a possible different tree than the magnolia. Show the suggested support beams for the upper story deck, the decorative support beams that aren't truly
Support posts.
Support posts. Posts, thank you. And that we would appreciate some landscaping on the west side of the drive, and that we do accept the extension of the deck dimension to 7 feet.
And would the maker of the motion include a statement about the acceptability of the open yard areas as presented?
Yes, and we do accept the open yard the open yard designation on the two sides of the property as submitted.
List the roof over the front entry as well.
That's in the modification area. Is that acceptable?
Yes, the roof entry is acceptable as well.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, there is a second by Bernie. Any further comments to the motion on the floor? Yes.
Would the maker of the motion like to include comments about the driveway that Betsy was requesting, or is that already been covered?
Yeah, she said that.
Was that? I'm assuming that's what Betsy was looking for.
The paving, but okay.
Oh, the paving?
To keep the existing driveway shown
Concrete.
with the modification or the revision of landscaping on the west
So
side.
would you, just to be clear, include the modification that the existing concrete driveway is acceptable?
Yes, the existing concrete driveway is acceptable.
Is that acceptable to the seconder of the motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is there further discussion to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, Chair will call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Okay, we'll see you back here after the hearing.
Thank you very much.
Pictures
I'll
are
leave
in
both
there.
of these.
Yeah, I need to.
Yeah, you need all-
I think there's some pictures in there.
Oh, no.
Did we last time, did we talk about this?
One's in there.
I don't remember.
Oh, yes.
Right, it's existing, it's just making rooms out of it.
Well, it'll come out at some point.
Getting approval for existing encroachment.
Oh,
There it is.
There it is.
Okay, so one of these goes to Katie?
Yes.
So that goes to Katie. Here's that.
I just brought a second copy, so you probably don't need
You
that.
can
you
keep
can-
the other side.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to item number 4, 1625 Overlook Lane. This is here for a fifth concept review. The project design approval is still requested. Project requires compliance with Tier 3 stormwater management program and was last reviewed on May 1st, 2017. You could introduce yourself, please?
Good evening. My name's Ryan Mills with DMHA.
Sean Lynch with DMHA.
And Rob Midday, landscape architect.
Welcome. Mr. Miller, if you could read our last action, please.
Yeah, number one, the board found that the project required further study of the plate height of the master bedroom suite element in relation to the existing grade. Number two, refine the site section in relation to the northern neighbor in order to visually review the relationship in terms of the elevations between the proposed master suite and the northern neighbor. Number three, the board has reviewed the story poles and found the second story element identified as the master bedroom gym office is within acceptable range in terms of the view corridors of a variety of adjacent neighbors. Number four, as previously discussed, the board considered and found reasonably acceptable the remaining issues as follows: the architectural style, architectural contents, the general configuration of landscaping, the landscape plan, and the location of the driveway. Number 5, study reducing the bulk and size of the master bedroom wing. Action taken by Sweeney, seconded by Chappandal. 4 were supported, 1 was against, and 1 abstained. Bernstein opposed and Miller abstained. Motion carried.
Thank you. Okay, if you could share with us how you address those comments,
Sure.
please.
I'd like to start with just a quick recap. As you all know, we've been here 4 times before. We've made many concessions, and we think the project has changed for the better, some significant changes. And we currently feel, working with the owner, that with all these changes in mind that came both from the board and neighbors, that the project currently, as it sits, is well within all city regulations, guidelines, hillside districts. So we worked really hard. We really pulled out all of those guidelines many, many times to try to stay on point. So a quick recap is FAR. So we're going to show you a couple additional changes. So we did do a couple more changes that we feel were significant refinements in this latest round since you saw it 2 weeks ago. So FAR, so size, we reduced again. So we now are 85% of the max FAR. So we feel as a team and ownership that it is well within the guidelines and really hitting the target that I think we've worked hard with the board to get to. And to point out, I think we mentioned in one prior presentation, we'll show you in the FAR calculator, we've dropped down the list yet again. So relative in the FAR, we're I think 8 or 9 or 10 on the list now. So we're sitting right in the middle of the neighborhood. And again, contextually, we're bigger than the neighbor to the north and significantly smaller to our adjacent neighbor to the south. So we fit right in at that scale as well. Height limit. So here's another big change that we'll walk you through. We lowered the entire project yet again 2 more feet. So a significant concession in our minds, as well to the owner, as you can imagine. So we'll be doing a bit more retaining, which we'll walk you through in the back. But so now we're down a total of 4 feet from when we first showed you the project and where the existing finished floor of that house sits relative to the others. So we'll show you, we think, as a balancing act, we now are, I don't want to say disappearing, but really getting away from interrupting any views from all the parcels above us. So we're really honing in on the neighbor to the north. So that's height, and as a reminder, we previously were no more than 17 feet at any one point, with the exception of that one 2-story portion, where that one 200 square foot bedroom was stacked. But other than that, we were never more than 17 feet tall. Now, we're no more than 15 feet tall to existing grade at any location, except for that one 2-story. So that's height. Thirdly, architecture. As you know, we came originally with a fairly contemporary project. We heard loud and clear, shift gears, so we did. And then what we understood from previous hearings and minutes is the board found it compatible to the neighborhood, found it actually beautiful and approvable from what we understood last time. So our recap will be compatible architecture to the neighborhood, approvable architecture, well within our 30-foot height limit, and spot on for the FAR. So that's our recap. Why don't I take you through how that looked a little bit. Here's the FAR chart so you can kind of see where we are. Again, they show it 2 different ways. So this is, let's see, the top one is sorted by average, so FAR. So you can see we're now number 10. So we've dropped down the list, so we fit nicely. Overall size, we're still towards the top, but like we've mentioned before, we're the 3rd largest parcel on this list, so it's really proportional to every other one. So that's the FAR exercise. And before, we're several hundred feet bigger than this one and several hundred feet smaller than this house next to us. Let me go to site and floor plan. So there was 2 major changes since 2 weeks ago. So like I mentioned, the entire house, all the plates, all the floors moved down 2 feet. And so it's not only that, but we also kind of honed in on this master wing, which was, I think, the point of contention, so to the neighbor of the north. So we did 2 main things. You see dashed in red. So we took the farthest corner, so this is the view corridor in question. So we took our bathroom core, which in the master wing, and pushed it back 9 feet. So, and reduced in size. So right now, this corner, which we feel is the contentious corner, is now back 9 feet and down 2 feet. So in our minds, that's a pretty significant refinement to this area. In elevation, we just realized today, we're showing you the succession of height changes. So that's the original height per the existing grade, but we realized the blue, the original, really was that box-shaped project, so the silhouette should be a little bit different. But so that's the original. That was last time you saw us, and now another 2 feet down, so we're pushing. So again, we'll show you in site section. So this is the front door elevation, but really the houses above us are, well, this whole ridge line is going to be nearly screened. We still may get peaks of this one. Here's our street elevation, again with those 2 sets of silhouettes and how we move down. Here's along the driveway side, the side we're talking about. We actually went back, I missed this part, we went back 9 feet, but we actually pulled in 3.5 feet as well, or maybe 4 feet. So that's the old silhouette, and this is the new footprint, or new elevation. The side elevations, which I think are the most telling. So again, this is looking from the north side. So again, here's our silhouettes. Blue is original, red was last time, and then our current rendered is existing. So these were the heights. Again, this is sort of the one spot that I think people reacted to, even with the story polls. So red, you see, is our existing grade as it moves. Right now it terraces a little bit. But so from existing grade, we are 15 feet. So we're working with, we're going to see how high we can actually keep that driveway. So we have very little interest in retaining. So if we can keep that as high as possible, we will. But from existing grade, we are now 15 feet at our highest point. And again, our overall here, you can see our overall height is 21 feet, but again, to our existing grade, you can see some of the portions. We're only 10 feet out of the ground, 11 feet out of the ground towards the high end of the property. On the other side as well, see here's existing grade in red. And then the dropping of the elevations, and then this is the 2-story portion, really, from this side, from the south side of the house. So we are actually we're set back, but this was the one place where we are greater than that 17 feet at our 2-story portion. Site sections describing, again, you can kind of see our existing grade and how much we're now retaining. And I'll show you in the overall site sections how it relates to what's existing. So here's all the houses above us. And then, as you remember, we have an existing retaining wall to our back neighbor, which we'll maintain, and all the fencing and hedging, that's 5-6 feet tall now, gets to stay in place. Then we have a high portion, and we're actually going to do a second retaining at our setback, at our rear setback, that does all the work. So that whole swath of land stays intact, so we don't affect that at all. So that is our presentation. So to recap, we feel strongly that we are meeting and exceeding all the requirements that have been set forth. We've been working really hard to do this. Our our approach has always been one of balance. So we understand this is affecting some folks. So our balancing act always was, especially now that we're lowering 4 feet, we believe we now nearly disappear for all the properties up above. We have very little effect on private views above. We fully understand that we do. We do affect our neighbor to the north and their view. We are affecting a private view running across our property, which we understand is a difficult change. But we felt, in the grand scheme of things, that was, within good neighbor policies, the best balancing act that we could affect the fewest people as possible while still creating a project that is well within the rights of this homeowner. Thank you, and then Rob, we'd like to go through some landscape briefly.
I think it's forward. Oh, no, sorry, there we go.
See if you get one of those microphones in front of you.
Yeah, and to kind of a recap on a previous presentation, the landscape plan hasn't changed all too much, but generally speaking, what we are doing is removing and replacing in more or less in place the property line hedges. We've got a failing Eugenia mixed pittosporum podocarpus hedge on the south side, and on the north side there's a Eugenia hedge that is maybe 10, 12 feet wide. So really way too wide, so we'll be pushing back that to the property line. There's an existing oleander hedge along Overlook Lane, which doesn't seem to be doing too well, so we'd like to replace that with oleander to match the two adjacent properties. Like Ryan mentioned, we're not doing anything to the back. We're leaving that in place, but we will add some screening trees. The types of trees that we're bringing in, we want to be sensitive to the neighborhood and to the views. So we've removed any type of tree that's going to grow larger than, say, 20 feet or so. On our planting plan, we removed the Quercus agrifolia, and we're going to be leaning more heavily on Quercus tomentellas and chatalpas and some eucalyptus cinereas. But by and large, we are keeping all of the water on site. We've got our infiltration basin down here, and we're breaking up the paving to the extent we can and bringing the garden in and amongst the house where possible. We have a lot of nice indentations where we're able to accent the architecture with some foliage and also provide some additional buffering between the properties. And as you can see on the site sections, you get a little sense of the flavor of the landscape that we'd like to bring in some architectural Dracaeanas, some cordylines, some nice specimens of size when they go in the ground. We're talking 36 and 48-inch boxes, so that we have some immediate impact upon installation. But the idea is to really take advantage of the nice textures that the architecture is presenting and layer in some softness with the landscape. And again, the palette, generally speaking, hasn't changed all too much. It's very drought tolerant. We're relying heavily on mass planting of grasses for the larger swaths of landscape, and then as we get into the more detailed areas, we'll be including more succulents and agaves and more sculptural plants.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to present?
I was just going to mention on this sheet, what's worthy to note is just context. I know there was a reaction to story poles, but what the landscape will do is really anchor this project, kind of as described. Back this portion of the house to existing grade you saw, which we're keeping in the back. I mean, we're going to be no more than 8 feet taller than existing grade in these back portions. So these trees will be significantly taller than any structure in this area. So that, I mean, that's just good context. Likewise, all of these trees, as they mature, I mean, all these trees will be 15 feet tall. So they're going to be in scale with the house really quickly. But that, I think that's all we want to say. But we are here for project design approval, so we can kind of keep moving. We got a big team waiting, and we would appreciate as any support and precise comment as possible to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Before we go to public comment, Mr. Lone, I see you sitting here. Do you have any information that we need to know about?
I'm here as a resource only.
Well, we appreciate that. We like
Appreciate it.
resources.
So we do have communication, and somehow I misplaced my pile, I think, went over there. We have several speakers. I'm going to request, each speaker has 2 minutes. I'm going to request the speakers, several of you have spoken before us on the previous occasions. I would hope that you're going to share with us new insights or new information. If you could keep your comments to that, that would be most helpful. We've all had a chance to read your letters in detail. We had an opportunity to do that over the weekend. So certainly if you have something specific you want to say, that's important. But if you're just going to repeat what you've said in the past, that may not be very helpful at this point. So if you can give us new information, that would be most helpful. So the first speaker I have is John Main.
Thank you. It's a little difficult for me to know exactly the changes. They said they brought it 2 feet down. That means it would come down 2 feet from here, which still totally blocks our view. 9 feet back, I don't know where that goes. So I guess the only thing I would say is we need story poles again, because it's extremely, these were the original, I call them fictional story poles. These are the last story poles. So if we come down 2 feet from that, or 3 feet from that, it's about 5 feet between there and there, we're not getting anything. Coming this way, we might get quite a bit. It's hard for me to say.
Okay. Anything else? Nope, that's it.
No, well, this is just another picture. I'll show you quickly now. Same, this is out of our different room, but same thing. Coming down doesn't mean a difference coming this way. And again, I would like to request story poles.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Mavis Main.
First of all, I have a cold, and so I sound strange, and that's just the way it is.
Okay.
So I want to thank you for your commitment to uphold the City of Santa Barbara Hillside Guidelines, and as you seek to honor the homeowners and those applying for the project approval. John and I believe views can be honored by neighbors and Frank Surian. Unfortunately, Mr. Surian has not been willing to modify the footprint of the proposed project. It seems to me he can have his views from every room, even when the present footprint is modified, such as change the design by moving the driveway to the opposite side, creating a mirror image of the current design. Or move proposed project to the back of the property, which they have some, and thank you very much for that, with the front door and the garage facing Overlook Lane. Or create an option that is in keeping with the character of our Santa Barbara neighborhood. The architectural design spokesman has repeatedly referred to dropping the project 2 feet, and that our view was only minimally impacted when, in reality, the third level was lowered 2 feet, and this is all that we had to was the existing plans. We hadn't seen these, so that's what my report's about. The third level was lowered 2 feet, and the master bedroom went up an additional 5 feet from the architect's initial story poles, and now you say it's down 2 feet. And you're also talking about putting in a 15-foot tree. That's going to block view.
If you could wrap up, please.
Oh, okay. The architect also stressed our view. Okay, that's it. So I would just like to close with, yes. The architect also stressed our view is minimally compromised when in fact the shoreline, ocean, and island views were compromised 50%, as was pointed out by a board member at the last meeting here. This is in addition to our property value being diminished. And in closing, wouldn't you agree that views can be honored by all parties simply by the openness to modify the proposed project containing what, 4 or 5 bedrooms, the office, the wine cellar, the gym, the living area?
Wrap up, please.
At 1625 Overlook Lane.
Thank you. I have a request. There's 2 people's names on here. I don't know if you both want to speak. Steve and Nicole McHugh. They present? No? Okay. They did write a note on the back that we are the neighbors to the east at 1633 Overlook. We have reviewed the proposed changes of lowering the house and reducing the square footage. We are highly supportive of the project. It will be good for the neighborhood. It was also a beautiful home. Okay. Martha Kay.
Ask a question. I'm trying to look at this.
You need to come up here, please, and speak into the microphone, if you would, please.
I didn't hear a lot of your comments because I'm a little hard of hearing. It is my understanding now that this drawing represents a 4-foot total drop, and that.
Let's look at the elevations because that's a true scale. I don't know where all the sheets are. I think they were back here somewhere. Yeah, here we are. Okay, so, yes, so that's where they started. That was the last visit, I believe, and now this is where they are today. Okay? So they're dropping a total of 4 feet for the most part through the whole project.
And this has been the part of the project where the gym room was, and it appears to be.
That's the gym room right there.
Yeah. I just want to commend the whole board for all of your hard work, and I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you. I also want to commend the architects for what they've been doing to try to make things a little bit less obtrusive, and thank you all, and it's late.
Thank you. Lloyd Beardsmore.
I too have a question
Okay, you need to talk into the microphone.
I too have a question. When you look at the front of this, it looks like what I did, where I took out the 3rd story, or what they call the gym. Here it's with. When you look at the first one, it looks like the gym is gone. Now all of a sudden you go into the plans, the gym is still there. So which is it? I'm confused. So it is still here, correct? But when you look at the very front, oops, sorry. Where is it? I mean, do you see what I'm saying compared to, here it is, here it isn't. And your first picture that you showed was gone, which would be, I was ready to jump up and down and go, yay, you heard us, you heard us.
That is accurate. This is an error. That's an error. It is this one.
Okay, so.
It's a second
In all
floor.
It's this one.
I understand it's a second
all
floor.
all of the technical views show
So
it.
let's go to the true.
First, let's go to the elevation.
Let's go to the elevations because those are the truest sense of the scale
Right there.
that we have. Oops, did I miss it?
No. You're on.
Gonna keep going.
That was an error.
Yeah,
The cover sheet doesn't have it. All the documents have it.
Yeah.
This is the second floor, okay? And the way you measure that is from this side elevation.
No, I understand, so that just goes back, okay,
Yeah,
so now
so
I
it's
know
the
what I
second
want to
floor.
say.
Okay.
Because I thought this was gone, and I thought, yes, you
No.
heard us. Because so basically, when I looked at these plans, you talk about neighborhood architectural style, and what was really missing were the single-story homes in the area. Took pictures. There's 4 of 20 that are visible second story. There's 6 out of 20 that have the other stories lowered into the hillside that you can't see from the street. 11 of the 20 closest single-story homes are single-story homes. These are the ones that are missing in here, and then 4 homes.
If you could finish up, please.
I will, are most impacted by the gym.
Okay.
So I want to know how this project addresses the NPO. I want to know how mass scale and overwhelming doesn't look, when you look from the street, if this was gone, yes, but it's not. And it just looks very overwhelming for the neighborhood. So
you.
I would ask that
Thank
you
you.
would address that. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, please? No one else, okay. The Cheryl, did we get, other than the correspondence we received earlier?
No,
other?
Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the chair is going to close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. Who has questions? Anyone? No? I just want to clarify, so I understand what's going on. When you first came, the first visit, you had roughly a 5,000 square foot house.
It was around 105, I think, FAR when we first.
Right, I understand that, but it was about, I'm just
Yeah,
looking at
sorry,
square
yes.
footage, 5,000 square feet. We're now down at a little less than 4,000 square feet, is that correct?
3,500 and then a 400 square foot garage.
So 39 something?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so you've lost almost 1,000 square feet in this process as you've continued to work that down. And then, just to be clear, can you go back to where are those sections?
The site, this is our site, then there's a neighborhood site section.
Yeah, I want to go to that. So, when we went to look at the story poles on our last visit, and we all came back, and it was commented in our motion that we had reviewed the story poles and determined that the second floor master plan as depicted in the story poles was not a significant issue by the members of the board. Let me make sure I reread this. Let's see. The board has reviewed the story poles and found that the second story element, that's this guy, identified as the master bedroom / gym office, is within acceptable range in terms of view corridors of the variety of adjacent neighbors. One of the things these sections don't show is the adjacent neighbors, hedges, trees, and so forth. But as I recall, when we stood out here and looked at that from this property, there was a hedge up in here, there's some trees, there was also a tree in here. And so when we looked at that, we saw this much of it at the top. And I think I made a comment last meeting about how you're going to treat any windows on that side. And in a minute, I'd like you to just kind of reiterate what you're actually doing over there. So I believe part of the concern of the board's last time for you coming back was basically this corner down here, the master bedroom, which you've now indicated you've brought in and dropped. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So if you could just show me what you're doing on that side, that second floor element,
Well, so
on an
the-
elevation.
Oh, on an elevation.
Yeah, if you could just show it.
If you can't hear, you're welcome to come closer. We can get you a chair.
Okay, so let's see, where's our driveway side? This is our elevation. So
So that's what we're seeing from the.
this is the second story portion, yes. So
Okay.
this was the original, second, and third.
You need to talk into these microphones, otherwise it's not being recorded. Okay.
Yeah, so this is facing north, and so this is beyond. So the second story portion is dropped 4 feet. So this is 2 feet less than, as you pointed out, what you guys were seeing from the neighbors above was, the top 2 or 3 feet or so. I can't say precisely, but so that's now down 2 feet. So now, it's right, as indicated in this rendering, there is hedging. So the hope is that starts slipping behind that hedging to everyone above. About the transoms, I didn't know if that was part of the
Yeah,
question.
that was part of my question.
We have metal fascia and gutters wrapping, and so in this banding, we hope to preserve the clear story facing the views and we'd like to turn the corner at a minimum to have one window. And then what we'll study, we haven't solidified, but the back, all the back can be solid, like spandrel panels, and those will turn the corner so we don't spill any light to the back. We'll keep that nice and dark.
Opaque panels.
Or even like solid metal panel, like as part of the window system.
Basically no
Correct.
light.
No light, no, is what we're talking about along the back and turn the corner. And then what we would like to study is, how much can the actual transoms turn the corner? At a minimum, we'd like to see one, if not two.
Okay. All right, and then if we can go back to the plan, let's see. Where am I in the plan?
Both levels were here.
So the one issue, was here. When we stood on this property and saw the story poles, you couldn't see this element from that property, but you could see this element, and that's the part you've brought in and
pushed down.
Pushed down, okay. All right. The other question I had, now that you've dropped the site some more, do you have any concept of how much earth maybe have to be moved around at this
A lot. Are we at, again, conceptual, but we're really trying to dial with our model. Are we at 900?
Yeah, I think just under 900 cubic
900
yards.
cubic yards
Yeah.
will have to come off the site, or?
Yeah, but that doesn't account for the pool, so we'll be filling in the pool as well. That's existing. So, I'd say give or take about 700.
We look for opportunities to balance. We'll work with Rob. We just haven't done that exercise, but just pure cut of the 4 feet is at 900, so that we either have to find new space for or start trucking out. So it does affect
So,
that.
in analyzing that, it's my understanding that a typical dump truck load takes about 10 to 12 yards. And so if you were to remove, let's say, 10 yards of truckload, 500 yards off the site, that's 50 trucks. If you had 50 trucks taking loads off at a truck every hour, you've probably got a week's worth of trucks, correct? Something like that.
Correct.
Okay, so now let me ask, so I want to go to question to Mr. Lamone, since you're sitting here as a resource. Does this board, how does the issue work with construction stuff? Oh, she just handed me something.
Yeah, we anticipated that there would be short-term construction-related impacts involved with increased grading, so we have standard grading mitigation measures that outline how and under what conditions they can do the export.
Now, is that something this board says, or is that left up to staff?
We're going to ask you to impose those conditions.
Okay, so you're going to come to us with recommendations.
Those
for
are
how to
them.
do- So these are it?
Yes.
So, and I'm not going to go through all of them now because we get a whole other meeting to deal with this, but the recommendations, there'll be limitations of hours of when this can happen. There will be a truck route that has to be established. There will be a traffic control plan put in place. There will be a whole bunch of air quality and dust and noise for the particulate matter they have to meet. There will be erosion and site control of the earth that's moved around on the site. So there's three long pages of things that will have to be looked at, and we'll be doing that at a subsequent meeting as this project moves forward. Okay, I think those were my questions at this point. Anyone else have questions? Yes, Lisa.
One question to Mr. Madej. The oleander in the front, when I drove by and when we went on the site visit, it seemed that after all the rain, it was coming back and looking pretty good, and you're talking about removing it and replacing it with oleander? Talk to me.
Yeah, my impression was that it wasn't doing too well. There was some initial regrowth, but it seemed very woody and very thick, and our thought was to start new and start fresh. Generally speaking, when it comes to oleanders, you only can cut them back so much before they just become woody and thick, and they get wider and wider. And I'd rather start fresh and young and maintain them at the right size.
My experience is that you can cut them back to the ground every year indefinitely, and they come back fresh and new. So maybe prior to ripping them all out and starting again, cut it back to the ground and then see what you get.
In essence.
free landscaping.
In essence, it's starting new, sure.
Oops, that's these.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I can let that go, though.
You had an aerial photograph, I thought, somewhere in this set of documents.
Aerial photo?
Yeah, a Google map.
Yeah, page
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm
SAS 101.
That's what I'm looking for. Okay. When we were standing on this house at that patio terrace, and looking this way, we saw story poles, et cetera. When I was looking this way, there is a house, I think it's that house, maybe it's that house. The ridge line.
That house.
It's this
That
house.
ridge is the
This
higher
this
ridge.
is a two-story house down here, correct? That ridge line, did anybody determine where the height of that house is and compared to what you're proposing?
This wing here is much higher than the main house.
Than the main house,
This
right.
wing,
Yeah, that's
this
what
is
I
a ri-
recall.
This is
Yeah,
a
this
ridge
is-
right here.
Yeah.
Ridge
Okay,
going
Yeah.
north-south.
Yeah, so that house was extremely high, and certainly if it weren't there, these folks would really have a 180-degree view from basically like that back to the city.
Not really, because they're,
Oh, because they have.
they're really low.
Yeah, because they have
back.
this in front,
Yeah,
right? So the view is this way,
and straight out.
okay? And right now, they're kind of like that, and what's happening is, it's this, more or less. Okay. All right.
I would like, no, I'll wait, comments, I'll wait for.
Okay, any more questions before we go to comments? Okay.
Well, yeah, I just, just because of the interest of the neighbors, I was wondering if you could just explain, I know you brought down the size to 85%, so the house did get smaller quite a bit from the first proposal, but could you explain why you still have the upper building, the gym or the bedroom, and how you lowered that so that you think it doesn't impact the neighborhood?
Well, let's start with why. From a design perspective, it's always about opportunities and constraints. So obviously, with this siting being a hillside site with view opportunities, the idea was to step down the hill. And so that was our starting point, trying to capture the views wherever we could. And then really the gym component was an additional piece that was not a part of the great room zone. It was not meant to be a part of the master wing. It was meant to really be a standalone component. So from a flow point of view, we all liked where it ended up. Now, as far as affecting views or why it's there or what impact it may have is now, again, remembering that existing grade that's there today is a few feet lower than the neighbors above. So now with the additional 4 feet down, even at 2 stories, our roof line is really right at the top of the hedge. So we never felt it was really any sort of impact at this point to consider. We don't think it's in anyone's way, nor is it even visible from this property. So it was really a design focused item that we just liked the location and liked the remoteness in the house. So that was the why, and we think we've mitigated kind of all the neighbors that may have a issue with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lamone, I've got one other observation, particularly because this neighborhood is obviously concerned about this project and probably other projects to come. There's a new state law that's now in effect that basically allows, if they meet certain criteria, any folks in any single-family residence or neighborhood to come in and add an accessory dwelling unit up to 1,200 square feet, these are their criteria, without anybody's review whatsoever, correct?
That's correct, currently.
So all of our neighborhoods.
The reason I say that is that we are under a contract to amend the ordinance, and we would expect something to be in effect within 60 to 90 days.
Oh, okay, so there is some action going, but currently under state law, somebody walks in any of our neighborhoods in the entire city.
Right.
We don't get to review those.
Right.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go back to comments now. Joe, you had comments.
Yeah, I think the reason that you guys have fluctuated back and forth between the second story obstructs view and the second story is size, bulk, and scale, or the second story is incompatible with neighborhood, and the neighborhood doesn't like it because you've added a second story right there. I think you've done a great job of lowering it to the point, and it shows on your sections that it is not obstructing the view of anybody anymore. And I think it passes our requirements that were on single-family design board that could allow you, and there are people in the neighborhood, and there are people up above to the, what we call the east of you, that have already stated that if they remodel, they're going to add second stories to theirs. And I think you've done a great job of lowering it, and I, for one, would like, I don't know if the board agrees with me, but I would like only in this area to put poles back up to show the height of what is happening right there in that, on that side of the property, because that's where you've made your major changes. You brought that back 9 feet, and you've dropped it down 2 feet. I don't really believe, I've heard from everybody that the poles are in the correct place, but I spent a lot of time standing over on the property just to the east. Yes, I'm looking at the east, northwest.
It's kind of northwest.
And
It's actually north-south property, so
yeah.
west to west.
Excuse me. Let's keep the comments to the board. Thank you.
I have reservations whether those story poles are. I think they're too high. I think they're too high. I think they block view. That they were strung up there so high that it's massively high above what you're saying. You're off your existing grade. And
so you're saying that the story poles may be inaccurate?
Yeah, I think they're inaccurate. I think they're way too high, and they're giving everybody an image or an idea that they're really blocking a lot from that. I don't know.
Yeah, aren't they certified?
Yep.
Or something?
All the information came from a surveyor put up by a general contractor. And was
That
certified,
corner
so
right there.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
Well, they're 2 feet lower than what you experienced, but as far as we know, they're accurate, or they were accurate. So.
Other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I finally got it to go out to the site. I went out there visiting it today. I do know, studying the architecture around there, you're introducing a whole new different style, and I think that's part of the upset. You're introducing a lot of flat roofs that don't really exist in the neighborhood. My experience has been, and I'm really concerned about, is the views. Granted, you may not be blocking views, but the view that they may have is giant flat roofs. So if you do, since you're adding all these flat roofs, you know, the aesthetics of that is critically important, because they may have a nice view of the channels, but they also have views of water heater vents and other kind of mechanical equipment, including all the crap that piles up on a roof, flat roof. So that would be something I'd see you'd be very sensitive of. And I think that's a lot of where the upset is. They also, the scale and grandeur of your house is really remarkable. And those houses up there do not have scale and grandeur. They're a very established old neighborhood, a very nondescript, cutesy homes, and they are what they are. So I do know what you're doing is you're introducing a whole new level of architecture, a higher level. And I think that's kind of what's causing a lot of friction here, is because you might be, as a possibility, opening the floodgates for future development with other houses around there that'll completely alter the texture of that neighborhood. So I think that's where the concern's coming from. I also think that you've gone bent over backwards trying to accommodate your clients' needs and wants and trying to minimize the visual impacts. And, based on the house that's there right now, which, based on the value of the property is grossly undervalued. I mean, it's a tiny little, So, as far as the designs go, that being said, I think the design of the house is beautiful, but I'm a little nervous about how what I don't know what to say about. I don't have a determination of what to, I just don't have a determination. So I look forward to my fellow board members' comments.
Any other comments?
I'll weigh in. I think you've bent over backwards to accommodate reducing the size, bulk, and scale. And I share some of Brian's concerns about the architecture. And as far as good neighbor guidelines go, it seems like if you could just take off that gym, bedroom, whatever you want to call it, that the neighbors might seem happy to accept the architecture more. So I'm still struggling with this, even though I think you've come a huge long way. Undefined.
Okay. I've just doodled this little sketch. I think if you had come in with a house that looks like that, would not have been a problem. And even knowing, having sketched this, knowing this could be an 8-foot plate height, and whatever, this house would actually, the square footage at 85%, if you came in with a very traditional roof shape, gabled ends, hip ends, whatever, which is generally what's found in the neighborhood, you may not have had a problem. So here's we talked about this at the beginning of the meeting. Here is the challenge. We have, and we got 150 photographs, or a big pile. I don't know if, Katie, you still have those here. They had a whole bunch
Yeah.
that were given to us.
There's some in the set as well.
Yeah, and in the set, previous
Show our
speakers,
street.
and, they all show, all kinds of stuff. The houses next door, et cetera, et cetera. Part of our challenge is, do we allow aesthetic difference, as Mr. Motisho would share with us, within a neighborhood that isn't in the same vocabulary as many of the other homes, although there are some homes with flat roofs, even though this is on the other side, I think, of APS. But generally, all those homes were built about the same time. Do we allow the nature of the neighborhood to accommodate a different vocabulary, i.e. flat roofs? Or do we, in our effort to address neighborhood compatibility, do we only allow certain geometric shapes to appear? In other words, the homes all have to have hip roofs, they all have to have gabled ends, they all have to have asphalt shingles or whatever in that particular neighborhood, because that's kind of the challenge. And if you go around Overlook, as you make that bend and it comes in and then makes that little jog and comes back out to APS, we have a whole variety of styles. We have a Tudor style, it's in these photographs. We have some Spanish styles, the house next door to the
You go to
the west.
You have them all.
Yeah, you have them all shown, so I'm not going to go through all of that. But you have a whole variety, but you don't have at this moment in this, and again, remember getting back to our conversation, defining what the neighborhood is? In this part of the street, you don't have that house. I think that house is on the other side of APS. So that's kind of the dilemma, I think, that some of you are feeling, and certainly the neighbors are feeling that. And part of the challenge here is we're all trying to envision something that isn't there. Okay? They're going to take down the house that's there and they're going to construct something new. And so we're all having to deal with the fact that we have to come up with a game plan that allows this neighborhood to accommodate, let me go to here, to accommodate a home that has some geometric forms that to some degree are foreign to this piece of overlook if we've defined that as the neighborhood. So again, I would like to hear from my colleagues about how you're defining in your own mind the neighborhood. You know, is it this? Is it both sides of APS? Is it just this corner? Is it just 1,000 feet? Is it 500 feet? Whatever. And then, is this vocabulary of architecture, as it's now being proposed, and I think we need to look at, not the landscape guys, but you guys, your drawings, please, is the materials, is the colors, is the landscaping incompatible with the language of the other materials in the neighborhood? You know, it gets back to the standing seam metal roof and all that kind of stuff that we've talked about in some other neighborhoods. So that's what I'd like to hear from my colleagues as to how you define the neighborhood and your level of comfort, because, you know, at this point, we've kind of allowed this architect to proceed now 5 times based on that we were inclined to accept a contemporary piece of architecture. Now, obviously, they started out with some white boxes, and they've now brought that into a realm of introducing stone and wood and metal and stucco. I assume that's stucco.
Earth colors, stuff.
Earth colors, et cetera. So we need to be clear about where they are at this point, having come down to us 5 times. So I'd like to hear from the board.
I'd just like to add too, that part's surprising, because I recall, I don't believe.
Oh, I complimented your house. I thought it was beautiful.
I wasn't sure if all members were here last time, but as was read in the minutes.
I understand, but I want to hear from my colleagues that discussion, because when and if we decide we were going to give this project any kind of approval, you need to have that very clear, because my sense is whatever decision we make, we are probably going to get this appealed to the city council, because the neighbors have already indicated in lengthy correspondence that they don't like this fellow and they don't like his house. So we need to be very clear, because we're the arbiters right now, as appointed to us by city council, whether or not we believe, based on our professional viewpoint, both as landscape architects and as architects and as our public member, whether or not this approach is acceptable to this neighborhood. So that's what I'd like to hear.
So, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I have a previous commitment, so I have to go, but I have to say, the reason I didn't vote and I abstained last time was I didn't visit the site, so I kept my opinions. I didn't vote, but when I saw this building, I thought it was beautiful as a modern structure. I think it was adding the stone, I think, makes it a really exciting home. Now that I've been in the neighborhood, I can say, oh, I can see why the neighbors are a little upset. So I think I'm clear on what I said to everyone, so I'm going to entrust it on you guys to make a judgment. But the point is, and that Fred is valid, is we already approved this style of the house. So we can't backtrack. That's not fair to the client. So
I think we've tried to, we have guidelines. The board has guidelines to go by. And we have used those guidelines to direct you in the direction you've gone. And I agree with Brian. I like the style that, and Fred, you're leading us into making some aesthetic, just straight aesthetic, whether we like it or not. We can't. Our board can't come up and say, "Oh, I really like that. That's what's going to happen." We have to stay with our guidelines and base what we say by our guidelines. And we have a culture here. Every architect that comes before us is going to take a bigger bite. We've learned that you guys take a bigger bite than you really want, or you really think you're going to get. And we have to use our guidelines to reduce your big bite. And your big bite has gone down considerably. And I think the neighbors have to understand that they can't have everything they want. Granted, and Fred, what you said, let's kind of define what is around this house. Is this board going to define this house by the 7 or 8 houses that surround it? Or are we going to use the whole that whole eucalyptus area, hill area, to define what goes on this lot. I like what you've done to this house and taken it from a North Hollywood, I don't know what it is, Buckminster Fuller, whatever it is, down in LA, to something that fits in Santa Barbara. And I think the neighborhood, if you really took a look at this house and the architecture in this house, it will do nothing but raise the value of your house and allow the other people that are going to change their houses, especially on the top of the hill, they're going to change their houses to reflect what's going to come in the next 20 years. And from the house just to the north of you, it's a beautiful house, but they built the house the way they wanted it. And you're building the house the way you're owner and you're the architect, you're building it the way you wanted it. You want the driveway on one side, that's where the driveway's going to be. I like it. I like what you've done. And I think the neighborhood can like it too. And I've defined what you wanted. I defined the area by the whole, by the flat roofs all over the area, instead of just these little dinky little, 800 and 900 square foot houses that are below the street.
Okay, any other comments?
Yes. I recall also at our last meeting support for the style of architecture, a mention of, it approaches Prairie. So I just wanted to be clear that that was my impression from our last meeting. And I feel due to when we were out there looking at the story poles, that you cannot see the bedroom, and especially now that it's lowered 2 feet, that even though I'm sure the neighbors would be happier if you ditched that portion of the project, that it does not impose on views. And my definition would be a little more expansive than just the street as well. Like Joe, I feel that there's enough different styles of architecture within the immediate few blocks that I can be supportive of this architecture in this neighborhood, and that you've bent over backwards to meet our guidelines.
Okay. Other comments?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Well, I did not vote for this project last time, but I do recall that there was support from the majority of the board, and I think, just to be fair, the board gave direction to the applicant, which they listened to and returned with, and tried to satisfy most of the requests that were made. So, I mean, that's what happened.
Other comments? I just want to share with you, earlier in the week, I went on the city's website and I played with the FAR based on the numbers, and just did the exercise of reducing 87% to 85% using the numbers you had provided. And we were talking at that point to get from 87 to 85, less than 200 square feet. It's like 110 or 120 square feet. So obviously you came back with 85%, so you got rid of that 120 square feet. So you've made an extraordinary effort to hammer down almost 1,000 square feet out of this house. So I think you've really proceeded to get the house to an appropriate size. And certainly if you just look at the mathematics that you presented on your little spreadsheets, it's not the biggest house in the neighborhood, it's not the largest FAR in the neighborhood, et cetera. By tucking the house down into the land, you've followed our guidelines. Typically, if you look at those pages that are in our book, we encourage folks to move these things, let the thing follow the terrain, We don't have anything that's looming. I know it's very difficult for folks to envision what it's going to look like from the street. One of the things it's telling to me is, yes, this is a mistake, but the fact is, once this really goes in and you see it down from the street, this thing gets really, because it's so far up there, you're going to have a hard time seeing that. And you certainly, I think we were all pretty clear, we could not see very little of it based on the story poles. And now it's another 2 feet down from the top properties, because we all walked out there, we all looked at it, and there were several places in all of those properties where you couldn't see it at all. I'm also understand that, yes, these folks may lose a sliver of their 180-degree view out to the ocean or 160-degree view, but we have asked this applicant to reconfigure, reduce, change, move around to minimize the impact that this home is going to have on the general view of everyone. And yes, there's going to be one party that will have a portion of their view, some part of the blue water that they won't be able to see, perhaps a part of the sliver of Santa Cruz Island that they won't see. But I also know that had we come with somebody else, another architect, and got one of those, quite frankly, I think we would have been much more challenged with hip roofs using the same footprint in the same volumes. Had they put hip roofs and gables on them, we'd really be in a fix, because those things I know would exceed the heights that you're proposing in your drawings, because they're all flat roofs. I know that Brian is always concerned about the flat roofs, and I think we've conveyed to you that the color is going to be very important. I think if you can concentrate on grouping the vent stacks, grouping air vents and those kind of things on the roof, that's always very helpful. But the point is that very few people, in fact, probably no one's going to see the tops of these roofs, given what we've seen even in the story poles that were there. We have tall houses here. Yes, it blocks views for some folks. We're going to get, we have a big house here with 2 stories, and it blocks views, I'm sure, that weren't from these folks, because this home is probably much older than this house. I'm sure when that house wasn't there, and then it got put there, some of their view may have been blocked. I don't know for sure, because I wasn't here before this house got built. So are we going to please everyone? No. Are we going to address the general compatibility with the neighborhood, with the general overview of everyone's view corridors? I think, yes, to some degree we've been able to achieve that. So I believe that we're at a point where we could, in fact, give this project design approval. And to share with the audience, if the board chooses to do that kind of action today, that action is appealable to the city council. And I know someone's indicated they've already talked to a councilman, and I know who it is because he lives in this neighborhood, good friend of mine. You'll have to deal with council. What I can tell you is, I think I shared earlier in the meeting, this will be a nouveau hearing. So everything's on the board again. Everything's on the table. Council can either side with the applicant, they can side with the appellant if the appellant is not the applicant, or they can adhere to the expertise of the folks they've appointed to this board. And as I've said a couple of times today already, in the 6 years I've been on this board, I've only seen one where they didn't proceed with our recommendation, and that was involving a project that had, I think, 3 or 4 homes in the application. So with that, I'm in a position to encourage a motion that would allow this project to get design approval. But I will leave up the motion to see if someone's willing to make that motion.
I'd like to make the motion.
Yes.
If I could just chime in to the maker of the motion, you might want to consider making the hillside design findings and the grading findings, if that's the motion you're going to take.
Okay. Is there some language that he should be looking at on that one?
In this, I think she's saying the grading.
Did we do that? Did we do this today? Yeah. If we choose to give this project design approval, we should adopt that? Okay. I'm going to let you go ahead and make your motion.
Okay. I move that we approve the design direction for the project with following comments, that the board appreciates what you've done to bring the FARs back down, and also to bring the project down 2 feet more into the project, and bring the master bathroom back. I will mention that we require that the grading be monitored. Is that a good word?
Yeah. Basically, what I think you ought to say is just they ought to adopt these.
Adopt the standard short-term construction-related conditions.
Okay. And if you'd like, I'll read those.
I don't.
I'm not going to read them all, but I'll hit the headings. You want me to do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So.
You just reference the date of the conditions, and it's on record.
Oh, okay, so May 15th, 2017. So just so the audience understands, as I think I said earlier, this will cover construction implementation, the truck trips that will be precipitated by this project will have restricted hours. They will have a restricted traffic route that has to be approved ahead of time. There will be a traffic control plan. There will be a series of 10 different issues that address dust, noise, nuisance, and particulate matter. There will be 4, 5, 10 items that cover erosion, siltation, water quality control conditions, et cetera, and all of those will have to be on documents that will be presented when the project comes back to us for final approval.
Right.
Okay?
And the project will come back to the board, full board, for final approval. And that's my motion. Do I have to?
Yeah, you have to do this.
Do I have to list all these?
No, on the other side, there's findings for
Hillside.
Oh, yes, okay. And also up here, the Hillside Design District and slope lot findings.
Okay.
That's my
And I would
motion.
encourage the maker of the motion to give a general overview as to the board's definition of the neighborhood.
Okay. Oh, that's a hard one. And
You said it a little while ago.
Yeah. I think that the board, the overview of the board tends to come to the conclusion that the overview of the neighborhood allows this type of architecture within the neighborhood.
Right, that's your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay. Yes.
I don't know if you want to include acceptability of FAR and style.
Yes, you probably better include that. I know you've discussed it, so if you could make that part of your motion, that the 85% as they're now presenting is acceptable.
I think, okay, I didn't say that. I did FAR. Yes, 85% is now acceptable.
And that the general approach, color palette, and aesthetics of the architecture being presented is acceptable.
Yes.
Okay, is that okay?
That's okay.
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
All right, Katie,
Thanks,
do we have
Kathy.
everything we think we need? Okay, thank you. Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
We have a second to the motion. Do we have further discussion to the motion? Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. And I guess I should say why.
Yes, you should.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you to everybody. I didn't support this project last time, so I don't feel so pushed in the continuation. And as the public at large, neighbor representative, in this particular case, I have to vote no and find that the findings of compatibility of style, design, and use of glass, and the overall placement of the buildings don't fit the neighborhood.
Thank you. Kathleen, could you make sure that that explanation is inserted into the discussion? Thank you. Okay. Brian left, so the vote is to us. So the vote?
3-1.
3-1. 3-1, and we are a quorum, so that's the vote. So, and it returns to the full board, right?
Yes.
The motion. So we'll see you back here at the full board, And then just so I'm clear, I need to officially announce this has a 10-day appeal period from today. It appeals directly to the city council, and as I recall, the appeal costs $400 and some dollars. And you'll need to see Katie if you choose to appeal. And certainly the applicant can appeal if he disagrees with our motion. Okay? Any further business before today's meeting? Hearing none?
Just the top one.
I have another copy.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay. There's no further business before the board. The chair will adjourn the May 15th meeting of the Single Family Design Board.